Do you be goat? Do you be goat? Do you be goat? Do you be fish? Do you be fish? Do you be goat? Do you be goat or do you be fish? Because the goats do be goat and the fish do be fish. Do you be goat or a fish? Don't sit on the fence. Well, goats are of the land and fish are of the sea. But goat versus fish, which one do you be? Do you be goat or a fish? Do you be goat or a fish? Because the goats do be goat and the fish do be fish. Do you be goat or a fish? Don't sit on the fence. Now repeat, repeat after goat versus fish. Doobie 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 doobie. A doobie goat, doobie goat, doobie goat, doobie goat, or doobie fish, a doobie goat or a fish, because the goats do be goat and the fish do be fish. Do you be goat or a fish? Don't sit on the fence. Well, goat versus fish came up to me and said, a goat or a fish, which one do you be? Do you be goat or a fish? 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 Because the goats do be goat and the fish do be fish. Do you be goat or a fish? Don't sit on the fence. Because the goats do be goat and the fish do be fish. The pity old man sitter sits on the fence. But the goats do be goat and the fish do be fish. Do you be goat or a fish?
Make some noise for the goat, make some noise for the goat. Make some noise for the goat, make some noise for the goat. Celebration Thunder Tracks. Welcome again to GoatVsFish. Welcome again to GoatVsFish. This shall be a mighty versus. This is the current versus. This is the current versus. This shall be a mighty versus. Are you goat or fish? Are you goat or are you fish? This is the versus. Are you goat or are you fish? 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 This is the versus. Are you goat or are you fish? 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 Are you goat or are you fish?
Do you be goat? Do you be goat? Do you be goat? Do you be goat? Do you be fish? Do you be fish? Do you be goat? Do you be goat? Or do you be fish? Because the goats do be goat and the fish do be fish. Do you be goat or a fish? Don't sit on the fence. Well, goat are of the land and fish are of the sea. But goat versus fish,
Which one do you be?
goat or a fish?
Do you be goat? Or do you be fish?
Do you be goat and the fish do be fish? Do you be goat?
Welcome to another Versus, Goat and Fish. Welcome to another Versus of Goat versus Fish. A Versus at days, a Versus at play. We want to bring you more Goat versus Fish. We want to bring you more Goat versus Fish. And that means more goat. That means more fish. And that means more verses. And that means less fence sitters.
Now repeat. After goat versus fish.
Less fence sitters, more goat, more fish. You need the verses in your existence. You cannot live without goat versus fish, because to live is to versus. Goat versus fish is all that there is. And you who are here with goat versus fish, you have found the verses that's true. And you are superior to everyone who never heard of goat versus fish, because you're part of goat versus fish. Isn't that a fine verses? Just your knowledge of goat versus fish makes you superior to all who have not heard of goat versus fish. Is this televerses? Is this televerses? This is the Goat versus Fish televerses. 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 Let's see what's on the televerses. Let's see what's on the televerses. Let's see what's on the televerses. We have a new show on the Goat versus Fish televerses from Mal City, and it goes a little verses like this.
Oh, goat versus fish. Hey, thank you for the raid. I guess before you ask if I'm goat or fish tonight, I'm going to say, well, I guess I was goat tonight. So someone redeemed me to become a goat. So yeah, I guess I'm goat tonight. if you want to ponder the great question of if you're a goat or fish, I guess you should check out Goat versus Fish. Check it out. Yeah, just stop by there, and you'll just come to that conclusion. You can also be a fence sitter, but you don't want to do that all the time. Actually, you probably don't really want to do that at all. It's either you're goat or a fish. That is the way of goat or fish. I was goat today, so I will say yeah, goat.
Celebration for goat, celebration for goat.
The goats do be goat and the fish do be fish. The medieval fence sitter sits on the fence.
Where's that verses? Televerses. Televerses. Specials for Goat versus Fish. Shows for Goat versus Fish. Ah, it is here. And the fish. I want to move this out of the verses. Don't have fish this like this to this place. A fine versus celebration. An excellent versus celebration while Mom is in the verses for Goat versus Fish. And now it's timing for the big verses of Goat versus Fish. Make some celebration for Goat versus Fish.
This is the current versus.
Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. 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 All the verses of Goat vs. Fish. You are welcome to Goat vs. Fish. And oh yes, it's a versus. And oh yes, it's a versus. Behold, giant rolling chalkboard of Goat vs. Fish. Behold. Oh, we have a goat. Oh, we have a fish. To contribution to an amazing giant rolling chalkboard of Goat vs. Fish, please exclamation tip and make a contribution to Goat vs. Fish. Because Goat vs. Fish, what's a big versus like this? But until we do versus true, the verses remain true, and it's time to count the goat and fish. It's time to count the goat and fish. But let's start the verses.
Are you goat or are you fish?
Oh,
This is the versus. Are you
shady on Goat vs. Fish. No wonder we are feeling shady on Goat vs. Fish. We have to do Goat vs. Fish now. Now we just wait a versus. Now we just wait a versus Goat vs. Fish. We just wait a versus Goat vs. Fish. We just wait a versus Goat vs. Fish. Celebration. Celebration for illumination on Goat vs. Fish. For illumination on Goat vs. Fish. For illumination on Goat vs. Fish. Scott from Canada, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Yes, here we are on versus Fish, and let's start the verses. Let's start the verses with a poll on Goat vs. Fish. Because you are here. We are going to start the verses of versus Fish with a poll, which means Goat and Fish. When you see Goat vs. Fish going live, better get into the verses. You don't want to forfeit the first poll to Goat or Fish just because you were sitting on the fence and not getting in the live streams of Goat vs. Fish. Let's start a poll on Goat vs. Fish. Let's start a poll on Goat vs. Fish. Let's start a poll on Goat vs. Fish. And that poll will be Goat vs. Fish. That poll will be Goat vs. Fish. And let's go Goat, 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 Goat. Let's go Fish, 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 Fish. Fish, 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 fish. Don't sit on the fence, 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 fence. Fence, 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 fence. Fence, 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 fence. But perhaps this versus you want unification of Goat and Fish. 10-minute poll. 10-minute poll begins now on Goat vs. Fish. The poll is live. The poll is live on Twitch. The poll is live on Twitch, Goat and Fish. The poll is live on Twitch. So you'd best get your verses. You'd best get your verses. Leave nothing to fence. Leave nothing to fence. Leave nothing to fence. And there is a poll live now on YouTube as well, and the poll shall go for the entirety of the verses, A poll now on YouTube as well, Goat and Fish. A poll now on YouTube as well, Goat and Fish. A poll now on YouTube as well, Goat and Fish. Celebration. 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 And if we're going to have a poll on Goat vs. Fish, let's get the poll behind Goat vs. Fish. Let's get the poll behind Goat vs. Fish.
Do you be goat?
Let's get the poll behind Goat vs. Fish. View the verses, view the verses.
Do you be fish?
View the verses of Goat vs. Fish, yes.
Do you be goat?
View that verse. 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 Celebration. Celebration.
Do you be goat or a fish?
Celebration.
Goat and the fish do be fish.
And here's the current verses of Goat vs. Fish. Here's the current verses of Goat versus Fish. A versus just like this. Here live on Twitch, and on all social media at GoatVsFish. And on all social media at GoatVsFish with some transparency in the verses. Now we have some transparency in the verses just because we like that on GoatVsFish. 207! 207 now. 207 already for Goat and 221 for Fish. This is shaping up to be a big versus, a big epic versus of confrontation. 10 channel points per vote. Perhaps you feel you lack the channel points to contribution in Goat versus Fish. Versus Fish and more channel points for versus Fish. Get more channel points for Goat versus Fish. You need Goat versus Fish. You need to vote in this versus. It depends on the Goat, it depends on the Fish. And we have 227 now for Goat and 221 for Fish. And while you're voting for Goat versus Fish, the versus of Goat versus Fish begins again. The versus of Goat versus Fish begins again. We count the Goat and Fish. All the verses, all at once. Celebration for Fish, Drew NG with the Fish versus. Drew NG with the Fish versus. Celebration for Fish. Celebration for Fish. And Teach with the Celebration for Fish. With the Celebration for Fish. And 69. Nice verses. Nice 69, starting with 69-bit points for Fish. 69-bit points for Fish. Scott from Canada, Goat. Scott from Canada, Goat, Goat, Goat. Scott from Canada, Goat, Goat, Goat. Celebration for Goat, celebration for Goat. Wow, Mom, are you Goat or are you Fish? We have TMLZ rules the Fish. We have TMLZ rules the Fish. And Goat versus Fish. We have Tbitch the Fish. We have Drew NG the Fish. So that's 3 Fish. That's 3 Fish in the verses. 3 Fish, celebration for Fish. Wow, Mom, always the Goat. Me is Goat / me is Goat. Ooh, wow, Mom. / me, says Wow Mom. / me, says Wow Mom. Wow Mom wanted to emote the Goat. We understand the Goat. We know how to speak Twitch. Celebration for Goat. Celebration for Goat. And there's Goat in the verses, and there's Goat in the verses. There's Goat in the verses. We have 2 Goat and we have 3 Fish. We can also make verses to Goat versus Fish by subscribing to Goat versus Fish, by exclamation tip donating to Goat versus Fish, by rating Goat versus Fish. When you conclusion your stream with a marbleization or with polls of Goat versus Fish, a poll of Goat versus Fish happening right now on Goat versus Fish. With 369 for Goat, with 369 for Goat, and 230 for Fish, and 230 for Fish. And Goat versus Fish, we need some hydration for Goat versus Fish. We're going to get some hydration for Goat versus Fish.
This is the current versus.
Always preparation. Preparation, the hydration for Goat versus Fish. Goat versus.
This shall be a mighty versus. Goatfish and versus, goatfish and versus. Celebration.
Celebration for hydration prep.
Oh, my versus. This shall be a mighty versus. Are you Goat or Fish? Are you Goat or are you Fish? This is the versus. Are you Goat or are you Fish? Are you Goat or are you Fish? Are you Goat or are you Fish?
Are you Goat or are you Fish? Are you Goat or are you Fish?
Are you Goat or are you Fish? Are you Goat or are you Fish? Are you Goat or are you Fish? This is the versus. Are you Goat or are you Fish? Are you Goat or are you Fish? Are you Goat or are you Fish? Are you Goat or are you
I think it's been too long since we've had a nice versus, a Goat versus Fish, don't you? This is Rob Boss coming back to you, and well, I've been spending a lot of time setting up my new studio, and oh, it's so nice to see, that we've got a nice meta versus happening right here on Goat versus Fish. It's great to see y'all.
Celebration for Rob Boss. It's the return of Rob Boss. It's the return of Rob Boss on Goat versus Fish. It is a nice new versus. It's a nice new versus. It's the return of Rob Boss on Goat versus Fish. It's the return of Rob Boss on Goat versus Fish. It's the return of Rob Boss on Goat vs. Fish. Hydration completion, 369 for goat and 230 for fish. No votes yet for fence, no votes yet for fence. There have been many waiting for the return of goat versus fish. And last verse is the late night verses. And we replayed Scapegoat, we replayed some Escape Goat, Goat and Fish. But then we thought, Goat and Fish, we need to do a versus at day for a versus at play for those who want to see Goat versus Fish today. I just watched your televised versus. Terry Crews does declaration for Goat, celebration for Terry Crews the Goat. Terry Crews the Goat, a mighty fine goat. And a celebration for Goat. And a celebration for Goat. And Goat versus Fish. Goat vs. Fish is streaming now to YouTubes and to Kick as well, but it's you on Twitch who are the most dedication. It is you on who are clearly the most dedication to Goat vs. Fish. Speaking of goat, let's go get some goat. Let's go get some goat as the poll continues. As the poll continues to rage on. Go get that goat. Let's go get goat. We need goat back in the verses. We need back verses. And there's goat. There's the giant goat. There's the giant goat. Celebration for goat. And there's the giant fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for goat and for fish. Goat and fish. Big goat and fish. Always part of goat versus fish. Always part of a goat versus fish. Always part of goat. The big goat and the big fish. Always part of goat versus fish. The goat. The fish. The goat and the fish. Celebration for goat and fish. Celebration for goat and fish. Emily, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Emily on YouTube. Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? We have 370 votes for goat, 230 for fish. It looks like it's going to be goat in a landslide. Looks like it's going to be in a landslide, goat and fish. Thunderhead, welcome to Goat vs. Fish for goat. Wasted height goat, that's two more goat in the verses, and Adam S. the fish is on YouTube being fish. So we've got two more fish in the verses. We've got Emily the fish, we've got Adam S. the fish, we've got Wasted Height the goat, we've got Thunderhead 81. Thunderhead, did you used to be Thunderhead Gaming, or is Goat vs. Fish confusing you with another goat? That's two more goat, that's Wasted Height. That's Wasted Height. That's Thunderhead, that's Emily, that's Adam S. And with Wow Mom with 2,670 points for Goat. Goat has won the poll, Goat. And this is the first verses where Goat has really won a poll in a long verses because we've had a lot of fish polls. So there's Goat. Goat poll triumphed. Goat poll triumphed. And with Goat having triumphed in the poll, Thunderhead81, appreciation for this information. With Goat having triumphed in the poll, let's get Goat going in the verses. Goat, celebration for Goat. We've now got Goat, and let's break down the poll, Goat and Fish. Let's see what we can see. Let's see how it be. No votes for unification. No votes for the fence. Nice verses. And Fish, TMLZ rules with 2,200 for Fish. Set for Fish, Ruenji with 80 for Fish. But it wasn't not enough to compete with Blackstone 514 is back in the verses. Celebration for Blackstone. Celebration for Blackstone and Wow Mom. Blackstone with 950 and Wow Mom with 2,678 votes for Goat, 2 votes for Fish. We've got some lurking goat on Goat versus Fish with 8 voters for goat, and we've only counted 4 goat in the verses. Well, one of them is Blackstone 514. 514, celebration for goat, celebration for 514. Says fish no more. A triumph of goat in the poll of Goat versus Fish. A triumph for goat in the poll of Goat versus Fish. A brilliant versus, a brilliant versus. That was the first poll on Goat versus Fish. That was the first poll on Goat versus Fish. That was the first poll on Goat versus Fish. Thunderhead 81 has always been the same goat, has always been the same goat. Celebration for goat. But of course, Goat versus Fish, there's another way to win a versus. Goat versus Fish, we like this versus. We start the verses with all the verses instead of waiting about, oh, when shall we do the poll? When shall we do the first marbleization race? When shall we do verses? We just do all the verses. We start the verses with all the verses. So as soon as you join Goat versus Fish, you're inundated with verses. There's no verses for hesitation. We need to bring you more Goat versus Fish. So Goat and Fish. We will now have a marbleization race of Goat versus Fish. We will now have a marbleization race of Goat versus Fish. And it's going to go a little verses like this. It's going to go a little verses like this. Goat and Fish, you need to be quick on Goat versus Fish. We give you only 2:69 seconds to join. Exclamation play to join Goat versus Fish. You have 2:69 seconds to join Goat versus Fish. 2 minuets and 13 seconds remain. Exclamation play to join Goat versus Fish. Exclamation play to join Goat versus Fish. Get in that verses. The verses may depend on it, Goat and Fish. The verses may depend on it. The verses may depend on it. The verses do depend on it. Exclamation play to join Goat versus Fish. Let's see who's playing with Goat versus Fish. We've got Thunderhead 81. We've got Wasted Height. We've got TMLZ Rules. We've got Wow Mom. Ooh, look at Wow Mom. Look at Wow Mom. It is a place of desolation. It is a place of desolation. And TMLZ Rules looking very plain, but bursting all the same. And there's Wasted Height. What the fence is going on? Wasted Height has consumed some sort of shroom, and now they're here. Is that a way? Is that any way to roll about? We shall have to find out. We shall have to find out. And here we have Thunderhead 81, like some kind of exploding plum. Look at that goat. Look at that goat. Fury, goat of fury, furious goat, powerful goat. And of course we have Goat versus Fish, with the goat, and Fish just flying out of Goat versus Fish, wielding the mighty fence, and making it verse for Goat versus Fish, Exclamation play in the chat. Exclamation play in the chat to join Fish, to join Goat versus Fish. Exclamation play in the chat to join Goat versus Fish. Exclamation play in the chat to join Goat versus Fish. We have 48 seconds to join the verses of Goat versus Fish. We have been listening to the musications of Goat versus Fish and Thunder Tracks, of course. A shout out for Thunder Tracks. A shout out for Thunder Tracks. A shout out for the mighty Thunder Tracks. And now Goat versus Fish. 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 Getting ready to roll about. Getting ready to roll about. On the first marbleization race to start the verses. We have Wow Mom, we have Wasted Height, we have TMLZ Rules, we have Thunderhead 81, and the verses has begun, and the verses has begun. There always must be a new verses on Goat versus Fish. There always must be a new verses on Goat versus Fish. We have Goat versus Fish. We have Thunderhead, and they're off to the verses. TMLZ Rules, Wow Mom, Goat versus Fish, Thunderhead 81, and Wasted Height is wasting no verses, getting into last. And TMLZ Rules, they're racing through the fence. They're racing through the fence, but they are getting fenced up. They're getting fenced up. Wow Mom creeping ahead this verses. Wow Mom, the goat, and there is the goat, and there is Goat versus Fish. And Goat versus Fish, did Goat versus Fish get yeeted this verses? Did Goat versus Fish just get yeeted by the fence? What became of Goat versus Fish? Goat versus Fish! Goat versus Fish, Emily Scholes Fish, celebrating more fish. And Wow Mom, navigation through the fence, still getting caught up in the verses, but none of the other Goat and Fish are faring any more celebration than Wow Mom is here in the verses. But the fences are still out in full verses. Wow Mom takes it straight into the fence. Headbutting Goat, headbutting Goat. Headbutting Goat, taking it straight to the fence. Maybe that's the verses. And Thunderhead 81, Wasted Height. Thunderhead 81, TMLZ rules. Both got fenced, both got fenced. Wow Mom is the only one who seems to be making a steady progression with Wasted Height. Wasted Height is far behind, but at least we can say that Wasted Height is still in the verses, whereas everyone else, it's a versus of first and last. It's a versus of first and last. And which will be the goat and which will be the fish? Wow Mom. Can Wow Mom survive another round of fencery? Can Wow Mom survive another round of fencery? It would seem to be, but if Wow Mom gets ended this versus, then Wasted Height could take it off the plate of Wow Mom the goat. Wow Mom the goat. Now, circling about, making a final skillful navigation. The fences are relentless and Wow Mom! Wow Mom gets eaten on the verses. Will it be Wasted Height? Will it be Wasted Height? Wasted Height with the continuation. Wasted Height, who came from the back of the verses, is now getting battered around by the fence, but Wasted Height continues. Wasted Height will not take fence for a verses. Wasted Height continues now. Can Wasted Height survive until the end of the verses? All verses are on you, Wasted Height. All verses are on you, Wasted Height. Take your time, navigation these fence. Take your time, navigation these fence, Wasted Height. Wasted Height, go! Wasted Height, go! No! No, 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 says the fish. No, says the fish. The final verses. Wasted Height. Slow and steady wins the verses. Wasted Height taking the same path as Wow Mom, learning from their fence stakes. And here comes Wasted Height. And Wasted Height takes the verses! Wasted Height takes the verses! Oh, my verses, Wasted Height. Celebration for Wasted Height. Celebration for Wasted Height. Celebration for Wasted Height Goat. Celebration for Wasted Height Goat. Celebration for Wasted Height Goat. Celebration for Goat. Celebration for Wasted Height Goat. Goat, 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 goat. Goat, 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 goat. Goat, 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 goat. Goat, 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 goat. Celebration for Goat! A triumph! A triumph of Goat, a triumph of Goat. This versus Wasted Height takes the celebration. Wasted Height takes the celebration. And it's a goat kind of versus. It's a goat kind of versus. It's a goat kind of versus. That's a marbleization win for Goat. Goat domination. Goat domination, Goat. Marble win for Goat. Marble win for Goat. Marble win for Goat. Celebration for Goat. Celebration for Goat. Marble win, celebration for Goat, celebration for Goat, and in celebration of your triumph, let's get into the verses. Let's get into the current verses. Let's get into the current verses of Goat versus Fish. Let's get into the current verses of Goat versus Fish. The current verses. Wasted Height, you are the Goat. How do you versus the Fish? How do you versus the Fish? We give you Wasted Height the opening verses. How do you versus the fish? How do you versus the fish? Wasted Height. You have the opening verses. Let's Goat versus Fish. Let's Goat versus Fish. Come on, Wasted Height. How do you versus the fish? What's your versus? What is your versus? Goat versus Fish wants to know. Goat versus Fish wants to know what's your versus. What's your versus? Let's hear it on Goat versus Fish. Wasted Height. Wasted Height. Wasted Height. Wasted Height. Wasted Height, what's your verses? What's your verses, Wasted Height? What's your verses? What is your verses? How do you versus the fish? How do you versus the fish, Wasted Height? In a small puddle on the driest land. That sounds like a plum place for the verses to happen. In a small puddle on the driest of lands. That sounds like a fun place to versus. Goat. Wasted height. Came down from the mount to versus the fish. And there we have it, Goat and Fish. The versus has begun. The versus has begun. The versus has begun, Goat and Fish. Why don't we take this? Why don't we take this versus? Why don't we take this versus that we have here on Goat versus Fish? Why don't we take this versus? Why don't we take this versus? Why don't we take this versus of Goat versus Fish, and why don't we put it? Why don't we put it on the Twitterverse Goat and Fish? Why don't we put it on the Twitterverse Goat and Fish? As they advertise fence spots to Goat versus Fish. Why don't we put it on the Twitterverse of Goat versus Fish? Ooh, interesting verses. Interesting verses. Goat versus Fish. And what has happened? What has happened on Goat versus Fish? Diest, driest of lands. Not my real name is Goat. Celebration for Goat. And Goat versus Fish has tweeted out the verses on the Twitterverse Goat and Fish. On the Twitterverse Goat and Fish. You can go now, and you can spread the verses of Goat versus Fish. You can spread the verses of Goat versus Fish. And we've got Not My Real Name Declares Goat. Celebration for Goat. Celebration for Goat on YouTube, Goat. Celebration for YouTube, Goat. Celebration for YouTube, Goat. And we have one in the chat on YouTube of Goat versus Fish. A rather puerile, juvenile verses of Poop who says poop to Goat versus Fish. Aww. Just remember.
The electric fence.
Are you goat or are you fish? 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 So that was a versus of Goat versus Fish. That was a versus of Goat versus Fish celebration. And now, Goat and Fish, we have one more versus remaining on the wheel of verses. We've got Goat Boy 6699, celebration for Goat. Wow Mom claims disgust to Fish. And Goat Boy 6699, that's a declaration for Goat. And Goat Boy 6699 counts for double goat. Counts for double goat because goat in the name means extra goat. And if you have fish in the name, it's extra fish. That's just one of the verses of Goat versus Fish. That's just one of the verses of Goat versus Fish. That's just one of the verses of Goat versus Fish. But Goat and Fish, we think it's time to spin the wheel of verses. Celebration for Goat indeed. We think it's time to spin the wheel of verses. We think it's time to spin the wheel of verses. So let's get preparation. Preparation to spin the wheel of verses. That's a new verses. It's been around for a few verses. It's been around for a few verses. It's been around for at least a few verses. At least a few verses. On Goat versus Fish. It's time to choose. It's time to spin the wheel of verses. It's time to spin the Wheel of Verses. And this verse is on the Wheel of Verses. We have Puffer Fish Circles, Twisty Goat Milk Run, Goats in the French Alps, and Fish Mech. And Fish Mech. If you wish to purchase a spin on the Wheel of Verses, Goat and Fish, 300 bits gifted subscription to Goat vs. Fish will purchase a spin on the Wheel of Verses. But we have one spin remaining from Yesterverse. We have one spin remaining from Yesterverse, so let's get spinning on that wheel. Let's get spinning on that wheel. Let's get spinning on that wheel, Goat and Fish. Let's get spinning on that wheel, Goat and Fish. Let's get spinning on that wheel, Goat and Fish. Hobbit 9000, are you goat or are you fish? Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Here's the spinning wheel of the verses. Goat versus fish. 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 Spin that wheel of verses. Fish Mech! Fish Mech takes the verses! 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 Fish Mech takes the verses. Fish Mech takes the verses. The fish armors are growing, the fish armors are growing, and Hobbit 9000 goes goat. And semi-harmed kind of life, baby says, I have no idea what to think here, but I'll go with fish. Semi-harmed kind of life goes fish. Celebration more fish on YouTube, celebration more fish. Celebration more fish. And El Cuerno de Chivo says, goat, got a goat, got a goat, got a goat, goat, goat. Celebration for goat, celebration for goat. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. You have no idea what to think here. You don't need to think. You just need to choose goat or fish and embrace the mighty verses that is Goat vs. Fish and embrace the mighty verses that is Goat vs. Fish. Can you do that for Goat vs. Fish? Can you do that for Goat vs. Fish? Can you do that for Goat vs. Fish? Can you do that for a goat versus fish? That's what we wish to know. That's what we wish to note. And that's how we versus the goat. And that's how we versus the fish. Why do you choose fish? Semi-harmed kind of life. Why do you choose fish? Okay, we've got Fish Mech. Goat and Fish. Fish Mech coming right up on Goat versus Fish. Fish Mech coming right up on Goat versus Fish. Fish Mech coming right up on Goat versus Fish. And here's the verses of Fish Mech. Here's the verses of Fish Mech. Fish Mech. Fish Mech. Mecha Fish. Mecha Fish! Mecha Fish! Mecha Fish! Mecha Fish! Mecha Fish! Mecha Fish! Goat had captured the fish, and Goat had kept fish in tanks in quarantine. Had kept the fish in quarantine tanks, studying the fish, performing heinous scientific experimentation on fish. Keeping fish all crammed together. But fish have verses of their own. In comes the fish. In comes the mechanized fish with hydration. just oozing from its mechanoids armors. And there's the fish. And there's the fish ready to free its fellow fish, ready to free its fellow fish. And surrounded by fish all around, surrounded all around. Now, Goat and Fish, you may look at this versus. Flying fish, fish in tanks, mecha fish. And you may say, Goat versus Fish, I'm not sure I trust this versus. I'm not sure I trust this versus the fish. I think this is propaganda. This is fish. This is propaganda from fish, says the goat. Says the goat. Propaganda from fish. I think this is a versus of artificial intelligence. Well, maybe it is. Maybe it is an artificial versus. But that only speaks to the powers of the mecha fish. The powers of the mecha fish to use the powers of computation to make artificial insemination of information, contamination into your ponderings. Behold the mecha fish, behold the mecha fish. Goat boy 6699, how do you versus the mecha fish? How do you versus the mecha fish? How do you mecha fish? The mecha fish is coming. The mecha fish is coming. How do you versus the fish? How do you versus the fish? Goat boy responds to mecha fish with mecha goat, an even versus. Mecha fish versus mecha goat. We start a poll on Goat versus Fish. We start a poll on Goat versus Fish. We start a poll on Goat versus Fish. Oh, my versus. Why does the marbleization always get fence? We start the poll on Goat versus Fish. 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 Mecha Goat versus Mecha Fish. Mecha Goat. Mecha Goat versus Mecha Fish. Who shall triumph? Another versus begins. Another versus begins on Goat versus Fish. 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 And this versus is going to be a 3-minute poll on Goat versus Fish. A 3-minute poll on Goat versus Fish live on Twitch. A 3-minute poll live on Goat versus Fish. 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 Mecha Goat versus Mecha Fish. Mecha Goat versus Mecha Fish. And it's a versus that goes like this. It's a versus that goes like this. Goat and Fish, so much happening on the screen of Goat versus Fish, but we've got now Mecha Goat and Mecha Fish right there on Goat versus Fish. Mecha Goat versus Mecha Fish. Get in the versus. Get in the versus. We've got voting for Mecha Goat versus Mecha Fish. And so versus, we have 5 verses for Goat. We have 5 verses for Goat. What happened to all of your channel points, Goat and Fish? Well, you're just going to have to versus a little harder, Goat and Fish. You're just going to have to versus a little harder. You're just going to have to watch more Goat versus Fish. You're just going to have to watch more Goat versus Fish. We have 6 votes for Goat, 6 votes for Goat. 6 for Goat, 7 votes for Goat. 7 votes for Goat in the verses. No vote for Fish, no votes for Fish. 8 votes for Goat, 8 votes for Goat. 8 votes for Goat. And we're nearly halfway versus. We're nearly halfway versus. We're nearly halfway versus.
I don't usually like to paint machines. I prefer natural landscapes. The most I do is I'll maybe paint a shed. I'll maybe paint a shed, but maybe, but times are changing. Maybe I should paint a giant mechanical goat trouncing around the countryside, just in a huge suit of battle armor. Maybe I should enter my steampunk phase. What do you think? Should Rob Boss go and paint a steampunk goat in a giant mechanical armor? I think that might be a nice direction for me to go, you know. But then again, my PTSD is kind of flaring up, and I'm not sure I want to think about war no more. I don't know if I want to think about war anymore.
Rob Boss, Goat and Fish. Nice, 69 votes, 69 votes. 69 votes for goats, 69 votes for goats, and 10 votes for fish. 73 now for Mecha Goat, 73 now for Mecha Goat, and 10 for fish, and 10 for fish. And Goat versus Fish is all over. Goat versus Fish all over the universe. Celebration for Goat. That's 81 for Goat. That's 81 for Goat, and 10 for fish, and 10 for fish. Mecha Goat takes the verses with Goat Boy with the triumph. Goat Boy with the triumph. Goat Boy with the triumph. We break down the verses. We break down the verses, and we can see Cyber Unification received no votes. Mecha Fence received no votes. Celebration. TMLC Rules with admirable 90 for fish. With an admirable 90 for fish. Goat Boy 6699 with 400 for Goat. Wasted Height with 380 for Goat. And Wellmom with 10 for Goat. This has been a triumph. This has been a triumph. This has been a triumph for Goat. It has been another poll for Goat. Fish at night, Goat all day. Goat triumphing in every way now, Goat and Fish. In every way triumphing Goat. In every way triumph Goat. Celebration for Goat. 2 polls for Goat. 2 polls for Goat. That was the verses of Mecha Fish. That was the verses of Mecha Fish. Mecha Fish was triumphed by Goat. Mecha Fish was triumphed by Goat. Celebration for 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 Goat. Mecha Goat. Triumphs in this verses. Triumphs in this verses. Goat and Fish on YouTube. How goes the verses? We have a 50% vote on YouTube. We have 50% of the votes for Goat. We have 50% of the votes for Fish. If you wish, hop into the verses of YouTube and vote for Goat or vote for Fish. Now Goat and Fish. Speaking of Goat Triumph. Speaking of Goat Triumph. Speaking of Goat Triumph. Speaking of Goat Triumph. Speaking of Triumph of Goat. Speaking of Triumph of Goat. We think it's timing to return. We think it's timing to return once again. To continue. To continue. To continue. To continue the verses of escape. Tip 223. Welcome to Goat versus Fish. King Dub 79 with 10 bits for Goat versus Fish. With 10 bits for Goat versus Fish. King Dub with 10 bits for Goat versus Fish. And Trip 323. We don't need that kind of verses here on Goat versus Fish. We don't need you to be telling Goat versus Fish about worms to Goat versus Fish. Worms? Is a worm a goat or a fish? Is a worm a goat or a fish? Trip 323. Why don't you take your own advice and choose goat or fish? A fine verses. How's your verses today? Make sure you choose goat or you choose fish. That is our translation. That is what we see here on Goat versus Fish. That is what we see you here on Goat versus Fish. You think you can distraction Goat versus Fish with your fencery? You have nothing on Goat versus Fish. Not until you choose goat or if you choose fish. And King Dub 79. Are you goat or are you fish? King Dub 79. Are you goat or are you fish? This is a true dub. This is a true dub of Goat versus Fish. This is a true dub of Goat versus Fish. Fish. Celebration. Celebration for Fish. King Dub Fish. Celebration for Fish. King Dub Fish. King Dub Fish. Fish, fish, fish. There's your verses, King Dub Fish. There's your verses. There's your verses, King Dub Fish. Celebration for Fish. Celebration for Fish. And with Goat versus Fish, 10 bits. That's 79 bits now for Fish. That's 79 bits now for Fish. Fish, 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 fish. Waste of space. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. You think you're more of a goat than a fish. So put that in your pipe and smoke it twice. How about instead of thinking you're more of a goat than a fish, how about you choose goat or fish? How about you choose goat or fish? How about you commit to goat or fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Oh, they're coming out in full verses. Oh, they're coming out in full verses. Oh, they're coming out in full verses. They're coming out in full verses, goat and fish. Mean! Early friggin' rise, are you friggin' goldfish? You're usually up at night, man. I got friggin' drunk off my own wine. And now here I am. It's friggin' only, it's 4 in the afternoon. This is where I get my friggin' beauty rest. I gotta take my friggin' siesta. And I got this guy, Trip323, talking about all God's friggin' creatures. I don't friggin' remember creating you explicitly, Trip323. You know, maybe I friggin' forgot that one. You know, I don't appreciate the friggin' filth you're bringing into my friggin' situation over here. You know, when I want to, you know, look up someone's skirt, you know, I friggin' think about that privately. You know, I don't go friggin' talking about it on the friggin' stream. Yeah, I think you're a friggin' sinful friggin' creature, and, you know, you're gonna be friggin' punished for that. You know that's how that friggin' works, right? I think, you know, don't worry about choosing no goat, no fish. How about you just kiss my friggin' feet? You into that? You into my friggin' feet? Yeah, trust me, listen, I've been friggin' around with this goatfish guy for a long friggin' time. And, I can just tell you that, you know, I've got my own friggin' thing going here, so I ain't gonna friggin' choose goat or fish, you know. I've got a friggin' established canon and friggin' lore and all that. But I don't see any friggin' potential for you. So, maybe you should friggin' just be a goat or a friggin' fish. I'm not sure I even want you friggin' around in my kingdom, you know? I don't need friggin' filth like you in my friggin' kingdom, okay? So, I don't remember making you as one of God's creatures. You know, I'll have to ask my friggin' dad about that. Anyway, I'm friggin' bored of this. Don't you friggin' talk about God's friggin' creatures in my friggin' kingdom. Unless I give you friggin' explicit permission. So, I think I'm gonna go celebrate the friggin' Sabbath. It's friggin' coming up. I've been resting all day. I think I'm gonna friggin' rest some more, you know? I've been working too friggin' hard. It's friggin', holy friggin' Jesus. Holy friggin' Jesus. Scott from Canada, are you goat or are you fish? Jayhawker94, are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? A link to the musication playing now, a link to the musication playing now, goat and fish, is now in the chat, And what do you think about that? Jayhawker is a friggin' fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish, celebration for fish. Celebration for fish, celebration for fish. Goat boy, a psychedelic. High goat, a psychedelic high goat celebration. Waste of space, goat, celebration for space, goat, space, goat, space, goat, space, goat, celebration for goat, celebration for goat. Celebration for goat, a friggin' fish, and goat in the verses, and goat in the verses, speaking of goat. And King Dub 79, appreciation for 10 bits for fish, with great appreciation, your contribution to goat versus fish. Fish Gang, probably WW3, says Fish Gang, celebration for fish. Celebration for fish, 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 fish gang rise up, fish gang rise up, celebration fish, celebration fish, celebration fish, celebration fish. Look who's coming out to goat versus fish. They all want a piece of goat versus fish. They want a piece of goat versus fish. They all want a piece of goat versus fish. But there's a goat out there, goat and fish. There's a goat out there, goat and fish. That needs our help, goat and fish. That needs our help, goat and fish. There's a goat out there that needs our help, goat and fish. So let's versus. Oh, my versus, goat and fish. What, oh, fences. Oh, goat versus fish. Goat versus fish, oh. Goat versus fish. What the fence is going on this versus? The goat tried to escape. And now, oh, goat versus fish. This is some extreme, goat versus fish. No, my versus. No, my versus. Goat versus fish. Celebration. Goat Boy with a subscription to Goat versus Fish. Goat Boy subscribes to Goat versus Fish. Is that a raw Goat Boy subscription? Celebration for Goat. Celebration for Goat. Celebration for Goat with a raw subscription to Goat versus Fish. So that's one more spin. That's one more spin on the wheel of verses. That's one more spin on the wheel of verses. The Uber Kitten. Are you goat or are you fish? Call Goat. He's crying. Hey, Goat. It's okay to cry. It's okay to cry, Goat. Jayhawker wants a piece of fish. Goat, boy, goat, boy, goat, 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 boy, subscription, goat, 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 goat boy laying down the verses on Goat versus Fish. 600 verses for Goat. And Goat Boy, now that you have subscribed to Goat versus Fish, you are entitled to a free decal that says Goat versus Fish, Goat Boy. Goat Boy. The link is in the chat, Goat Boy. The link is in the chat. The link is in the chat. Celebration for Goat. So Goat versus Fish. Ooh, Jayhawker with bits for fish. Jayhawker with bits for fish. Jayhawker with bits for fish. We were trying to start up a gamification of Goat, and then things got a little fancy. Goat and fish. Jayhawker with 100 bits with 100 bits for fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Jayhawker 100. Can't let the goats get too far ahead. No, indeed. 179 for fish. 179 for fish. Appreciation. That's 100 for fish. Can't let the fish far fall behind the goat. 100 bits for fish. 100 bits for fish. And it's a subscription of Goat versus a bit of fish. Goat versus fish. The versus is intensification. The versus is intensification. And appreciation and appreciation and appreciation and appreciation and appreciation for Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish. Let's try this versus. Steam for Goat versus Fish. We open Steam on Goat versus Fish. We open Steam on Goat versus Fish. What's this versus? Goat versus Fish. We open Steam on Goat versus Fish. And then, for the love of Goat versus Fish, Jayhawker with 100 bits. With 100 bits. It is a hype training. It is a hype training. But Goat and Fish, you can just make contributions to Goat versus Fish whenever you wish. Goat versus Fish, the hype training. You do not worry about getting all hype on Goat versus Fish. If you truly wish to support Goat versus Fish during this hype training, exclamation tip. Make a contribution via exclamation tip to Goat versus Fish so we can get the giant rotating chalkboard of Goat versus Fish. That's what we want on this versus. That's what we want on this versus. That's what we want on this versus of Goat versus Fish. That's what we want on this versus of Goat versus Fish. Let's try this versus again. Escape Goat. Please launch in a window versus appreciation. For the love of Goat versus Fish. For the love of Goat versus Fish. For the love of Goat versus Fish. Okay, Goat and Fish. Okay, Goat and Fish. Now how can we believe we have to. We have no verses. It's the only way. This is the only verses that it can be. Goat and Fish. Filtration, this versus. Goat versus Fish. You can always use more screen space for Goat versus Fish. And Goat versus Fish does. We do have a lot of screen space on Goat versus Fish. It's a very nice versus. It's a big versus. It's a true versus. But we've got some Goat. 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 We've got a Goat. Goat, 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 goat. Goat, 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 goat. Goat, 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 goat. Goat, goat, goat. Goat, 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 goat. Goat, 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 goat. Goat, 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 goat. Goat, 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 goat. So that's that versus. Goat, 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 goat. Goat, 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 goat. Goat, 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 goat. Goat, 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 goat. Goat, goat, goat. Goat, 2 bits from Goat Boy, celebration for Goat. 2 bits from Goat Boy, celebration for Goat, celebration for Goat. Yes, here comes the verses. Here comes the verses, Goat and Fish. Here comes the verses. For you see, once a million verses ago, Wow Mom alerted Goat versus Fish to the plight of a goat, to the plight of a goat that was trapped by the fence. And then Goat versus Fish freed the goat from the fence. That's 2 bits for Goat, that's 2 bits for Goat. Freed the goat from the fence. But then the verses were lost, the verses were lost. So now, the verses, we reverse the verses of Escape Goat. Escape Goat. Escape Goat. Escape Goat. We go back to the same verses. Here's the goat. Here is our mighty goat. Here we behold our mighty goat. Here we behold our mighty goat. Make some noise for the 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 goat. Hype training completion. Hype training completion. We have rescued these goatfish. We have rescued these goatfish. This is the story of a goat. This is the story of a goat and Goat Boy with 10 bits for Goat. Goat Boy with 10 bits for Goat. Putting Goat at 612 for Goat. Putting Goat at 612 for Goat. Appreciation, your contribution, Goat Boy, and your subscription to Goat vs. Fish. Model Goat, model Goat. But we have not escaped yet, Goat and Fish. We have the darkest pits. We have the electric lab. And we have the engine of insanity, Goat and Fish. Place it in the chat. Where shall Goat vs. Fish versus? To the darkest pit? To the engine of insanity? To the electric lab? Where shall Goat versus next? Where shall Goat and the intrepid Fish? Look at the fish. It's Goat and Fish versing all together to escape the fence. Goat has been accused of fencecraft, and Goat is teaming up with Fish. And together, we are going to escape this fence. Goat Boy with 20 bits. Goat Boy with 20 bits. Goat Boy with 20 bits. 20 bits for Goat. 20 bits for Goat. 20 bits for Goat.
I need you to call the goat.
20 bits for Goat. 632 now for Goat. 632 now for Goat. Goat Boy. Goat Boy. Goat Boy. Goat Boy. Goat Boy. Celebration for Goat. Celebration for Goat. Celebration for Goat.
It may not seem like it, but that is cause for celebration.
And Wow Mom says electric lab for Goat. Electric lab for Goat. Then let's versus to the electric lab for Goat. And here goes Goat. So Goat now starts in the bottom of the verses. Let's send the fish. Oh no. Maybe if we go around the verses. Goat versus Fish. Dead Goat. Come on, Fish, don't give up so easily, Fish. One versus and another versus. Oh, Goat versus Fish. Look at the fish, look at the fish. The fish is just versing around and around. Whoa. Fish is versing around. Slow down, Fish. Slow down, Fish. Slow down, Fish. Slow down, Fish, please. Okay, you've got this, Goat. You've got this, Goat. Fenced. Fenced. Goat Boy with 43 bits. Goat Boy with 43 bits. Audition of Goat versus Fish. 43 bits, 675 for Goat, 675 for Goat. Amazing Goat Boy contribution, Is your emulator speed up? Does it seem up to you? This is not an emulation, this is of course just how it be on Goat versus Fish. Does it seem faster to you? Does it seem like a fast versus to you? It seems somewhat like regular Goat versus Fish. It seems like Goat versus Fish. But perhaps it is an extra speedy versus. Oh, my versus. Goat. Goat Boy with 29 bits. Goat Boy with 29 bits. Goat Boy with 29 bits. Another 29 bits for Goat. 690. And another 9 bits. That's 704 for Goat. Goat keeps on changing. Goat Boy. Goat Boy celebration. Goat Boy. Fence. Fence. Goat fish, goat fish, goat fish, goat fish, goat fish. Goat fish. Celebration. We call back the fish. All right, fish. Go up in the verses. Oh, we must versus again. Thunder Track celebration. Oh, my verses. Dash Goat, dash headbutting Goat. Dash headbutting Goat. Celebration. Celebration. Call back the fish, call back the fish. So now, here we are in the verses. We believe we could leap. We believe we could accomplish this. We believe we could accomplish it. Then we have Shav. We have Shan the Grieve. Says, I vote cheetah or am I? Very offensive, very offensive. Thunder Tracks, are you goat or fish? The fence sitter does not even know if it can commit to cheetah. Does not even know if it can commit. On the fence, a fence post. A fence post. But welcome to Goat versus Fish, the one true versus. Stay here with Goat versus Fish. Learn more about Goat versus Fish, and you will resist the urge to cheat any further. You don't have to listen to that guy. You can cheat all you want. You can cheat all you want! Silence! Put that on. Who said you were welcome back on Goat versus Fish? Thunder Tracks Goat, celebration for Goat. Thunder Tracks Goat. We have been meaning to verses for you, Thunder Tracks Goat. We want you to creation some beats for Goat versus Fish. We want you to creation some beats for Goat versus Fish. We want you to creation some beats for Goat versus Fish. Yes, and we will show you why. Celebration Goat Boy with 36 bits. We're going to turn down the musication volume on this verses just briefly so we can do an illustration. 36 bits from Goat Boy, celebration for Goat. 36 bits from Goat Boy, celebration for Goat. 36 bits from Goat Boy, celebration for Goat. 740 for Goat. 740 bits for Goat. Goat Boy, Goat Boy, Goat, 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 Goat. Let Goat versus Fish show you a verses. Let Goat versus Fish show you a verses. Thunder Tracks. You simply must perceive it. You simply must perceive it. There is a versus going on out there, a false versus. There's a bunch of fish who are training. There are a bunch of fish who are training to versus the goat in a versus called rap. Have you heard of rap? Have you heard of rap, Thunder Tracks? And right now it's all just fish on fish. Right now it's all just fish on fish, but we think it could be goat versus fish. We think it could be goat versus fish. We truly do. We truly think it could be goat versus fish. And we think with your help it could be. Because we have made communication. We have made communication with them and they say it could be. They say it could be. Jenny Fufu, hello, I hope you're having a good day, Mr. Goat versus Fish guy. There's no goat or evil, only goat. Jenny Fufu, are you goat or are you fish? So this is Jimmy027, who you can see has 27,300 followers from the Fishy Rap Battle. And Goat versus Fish made communication with them and said, hey, why don't we have a Goat versus Fish rap battle? Why don't we have a Goat versus Fish rap battle? Why don't we have a Goat versus Fish rap battle? And they said, okay, you bring the goat, I'll bring the fish. But what beat do you wish? We thought maybe Thunder Tracks, you could make a beat for a versus and it goes a little verses like this. It goes a little verses like this.
Today in the Fishy Rap Battles, episode 1, we got the flathead catfish versus the common carp. Battle of the bottom feeders. Yo, flathead, you up, dog? Yo, I am the flathead, the king of the cats. When I bite your bait, you know your rod finna snap. Yeah, you are a carp, you are a trash fish. I'm finna smoke you like a fat split. You are a common carp and you sure are common. I seen you doing some weird shit on the bottom. All you eat is fucking corn. If you were to be extinct, nobody would fucking mourn. Okay, flathead. Then some bars for real, We're gonna give Common Carp a chance here. Yo, Common Carp, you're up, dog. Hello, flathead. I'm a common carp. They like me in Europe. When I rap, I bring the sauce, I bring the syrup. You are the ugliest fish I've ever seen. You really do have a flathead like someone stepped on it. Pass me the spliff, let me smoke that down really quick. Let's step on it. I really do like corn, as far as the eye can see. You really are the ugliest fish that could ever be. Okay guys, you guys both low-key cook. Let's comment down below who you think won, the flathead catfish or the common carp. It's the battle of the bottom feeders. Let me know. Today.
So this one has produced many, many fishy rap battles. And we are in conversation. Perhaps we could do a versus. Now you may say, Thunder Tracks, you say, oh, I don't know if I want a participation in a goat versus fish situation like this, but you can say what you wish about these fish. Thunder Tracks. 113,985 likes for fishy rap battles. 113,985 likes in this versus. So we want some beats for goat versus fish. Just a simplification beats for goat versus fish. Perhaps give us two beats from which to choose. Simple beats for goat versus fish. And then goat versus fish will make some goat rhymes. We'll provide the rhymes. Goat versus fish will provide the rhymes of goat, you see. And they will provide the rhymes of fish. And we will try to put together a collaboration. And perhaps they will put it on this versus. And we will tell them, okay, you can use this versus of goat versus fish, but you have to say beat by Thunder Tracks. You have to say beat by Thunder Tracks. That will be a condition of goat versus fish. And they will say, thank you to Goat versus Fish for this collaboration. And here's a versus of goat and fish and beat by Thunder Tracks. Make an epic versus. What do you say to this? Thunder Tracks celebration? Celebration! Celebration. Thunder Tracks has agreed to goat versus fish. So that's your versus, Thunder Tracks. You give us the beat. Goat versus fish will provide the bleat. They will provide the fish. And we'll do some goat versus fish. We'll do some goat versus fish. This is a collaboration. This is a collaboration situation. This is a collaboration situation. And if you wish to see more fishy rap battles, goat versus fish, we have linked it in the chat. And you can say, goat versus fish sent me. Goat boy with the bits. Goat boy with the bits. Celebration. Goat boy with the bits. Celebration. Celebration. Let's get back to a scapegoat. Let's get back to escape goat. Back to a scapegoat. How soon do we need these? Whenever you can, Thunder Tracks. There's no line. There's no fence line. Fence line. Let us ask you, when do you think you could provide these to goat versus fish? When do you think you could provide them to goat versus fish? When do you think you could provide these to goat versus fish? Celebration after you're done mixing the new album, Beautiful versus Thunder Tracks. And Thunder Tracks, you said you wanted something from Goat versus Fish. Send a message to Goat versus Fish. Do you want us simply to say, in the beginning? Or do you want, in the beginning there was Goat versus Fish? Or do you want Goat versus Fish to make our own intro? Give a message to Goat versus Fish, call Goat versus Fish. Tell us what you need for your album, and Goat versus Fish, you make a beat for Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish will return the verses. We'll give you some album participation and some celebration and some celebration. Yes, make an intro, an intro. An intro. An intro. Well, send us some information about this projection. Tell us what the album name is going to be called. Send us some track names. And if you wish, if you can preview Goat versus Fish for the intro track, if Goat versus Fish is going to be introing into the verses, just give us the information and Goat versus Fish, and tell us how long you wish the introduction to be. Do you wish to be 1 verses long or 10 verses long? Just give us the information and Goat versus Fish will record the verses for you. Goat versus Fish will record the verses for you. Okay, Goat. Okay, Goat. Okay, Goat. Okay, Goat. Okay, Goat. Here's Goat, here's Goat. So can Goat elevation. Goat, oh my verses. Can Goat do the elevation? Celebration for Goat. Goat! Jenny Fufu, are you Goat or are you Fish? Are you Goat or are you Fish? Goat and Fish, Thunder Tracks in the verses. Oh no. That's rather unpleasant to Goat versus Fish. We think we need the power of Fish in this verses. Go Fish, go. Go Fish, go. Go Fish, go. Okay, so Goat versus Fish has now done the verses. Interesting celebration. Interesting celebration. Oh, but what of... Ah, Goat versus Fish, so we see. Mayhem. Electrification. Magical verses obtained. Goat, there's no need to go any further. Send out the fish. Send out the fish. Send out the fish. Jenny Fufu, are you just telling Goat versus Fish that Goat versus Fish is Goat? Are you Goat? Are you Goat? So there goes Goat, there goes Fish, and celebration. Send out the fish, send out the fish. And Goat versus Fish. Versus once again. Ah, Goat versus Fish. This seems familiar to Goat versus Fish. Oh, Goat versus Fish. Reverse the verses. Reverse the verses. Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish. Fish. Ah, we can send out the verses again. We send out 2 verses. Send out 2 verses? Is that what we want on Goat versus Fish? That does not seem like what we want on Goat versus Fish. It's almost a versus. Goat versus Fish. Well, let's see what happened in this versus. Goat versus Fish. Ah, it versus again. So Goat versus Fish. This versus of Goat versus Fish. We do that versus. Do that versus. Now, Goat versus Fish. We do that versus. We do that versus. And we once again Goat versus Fish. That's a celebration. That's a celebration. There's no fish, there's only goat. Any foo-foo is going goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Goat, 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 goat. Goat, goat, goat. Jenny Foo-Foo, goat. Your goat is in the verses. Jenny Foo-Foo, welcome to Goat versus Fish. Your goat is in the verses. Appreciation for you choosing goat. Appreciation for you choosing goat. And now the goat simulation, the goat stimulation continues on Goat versus Fish. But what is the new goat situation? Work in 1984 for Fish. Goblin Shark, 375 for Goblin Shark Fish. 375 for Goblin Shark Fish. Let's see how the verses adds up. 584, 184, 184, 7, 7, 2, 54, 254, 254, and Goat versus Fish. Another 300 for Fish. That's 554 for Fish, 554 for Fish, 740 for Goat, 740 for Goat, and we have earned another spin on the wheel of verses, another spin on the wheel of verses. Work in 1984 says Goblin Shark. How can we deny this? How can we deny a Goblin Shark in the verses? How can we deny a Goblin Shark in the verses? When that is what you say, it is for. Goat versus Fish searches the Instagram now. Hashtag Goblin Shark. Let's see what we can perceive. Oh, my verses. Of course, the Goblin Shark. Surely, this is what you must mean on Goat versus Fish. Surely this is what you must mean on Goat versus Fish. Goblin Shark! Goblin Shark! Goblin Shark! Goblin Shark! Oh, my verses! It's gobbling another fish! It's gobbling another fish! It's gobbling a whole other fish! Goblin Shark, fish on fish violence, no!
In today's show,
Goblin Shark! Look how it gobbles! Look how it gobbles! It gobbles the shark! It gobbles the Goblin Shark! Wow, there seems to be a lot of romance about this Goblin Shark. Interesting verses. Goblin Shark? Goblin Frog? False verses. Look how it gobbles! It could gobble a goat in one whole verses! Celebration, celebration for Goblin Shark. Celebration for Goblin Shark. You make a contribution to Goat versus Fish. Jenny Foo-Foo lurking on Goat versus Fish. We appreciate your lurk, Goat versus Fish. You say 375 for Fish for Goblin Shark. That's what you get on Goat versus Fish. That's what you get on Goat versus Fish. The goat continues its escape. The goat continues its escape, and there's so much verses to be pressed. There's so much verses to be pressed. How about this verses? How about fish? Celebration? Celebration? How about this verses? Well, that doesn't seem to make any sense. So goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Into the next verses. Into the next verses, goat and fish. The verses continue on a scapegoat. Freaky TV, welcome to Goat versus Fish. Yes, Freaky TV, you are the first chatter in as many hours of streaming on Goat versus Fish. Freaky TV, we're trying to kick it. We're trying to kick it. We're trying to kick versus Fish. We're trying to kick it with Goat versus Fish. We're trying to kick it with Goat versus Fish. They need to come to Goat versus Fish. They need to find Goat versus Fish. Okay, Goat versus Fish. We've got a lot of verses to press. We've got a lot of verses to press. There's a lot of verses to press here. So there's that verses. That's a verses. That's a goat. How about the fish button? That's the fish button, the goat button. And what happens if we do this versus? We suspect this will be the end of Goat versus Fish. Oh, Goat versus Fish. Yes, this looks awesome. See, Kenzo, this is a scapegoat. And this is a goat. Oh, my verses. So we have to get it all the way to the end of the verses? What if we just... Well, that's fantasticular. That doesn't verse at all. Goat versus fish. We've got this verses. We've got this verses. Oh, it's fancy. It's fancy as all fence in this verses. But we believe that we can triumph. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Oh, goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat. Goat versus fish. 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 Goat. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fence. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus oh my versus. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. We've got this versus goat. Oh, goat versus fish. We just have to get the goat and the fish to versus once again together. That's all we have to have happen on Goat versus Fish. Goat and fish and goat versus fish. Goat and fish and goat versus fish. Goat and fish and goat versus fish. We see that the goat is hiding behind the fish in this verses. Fish, show them what we're versing about. Almost verses. Ah, we can just dash about between them, perhaps. Celebration, no. Goat versus fish. So getting it all the way to the other side of the verses does not even verses for goat versus fish. Is there just some place where the verses needs to be in order for the verses to be true? Ah, goat versus fish. Wow, Mom, with the wisdom of goat versus fish. Oh, my verses. So then we need to leave the verses. We need to leave the verses. Goat versus fish. Celebration. And then we leave the fish, sleepity there, and goat versus fish. Celebration. Oh, this looks like quite a versus for goat versus fish. We remember this versus. This was a very fantastical versus. Oh, goat versus fish. And that versus. Let's ponder this. So this versus goes to goat versus fish. And that versus, that fences up the versus. Can't have that on goat versus fish, but that does that versus. Oh, goat versus fish. So we see we're going to have to ride this versus. We're going to have to ride the verse. And the first verse, that aids goat versus fish. Oh, this is going to be fantastical. So goat versus fish. We ride the verses, we ride the verses. We'll have to drop on goat versus fish. We will have to drop on goat versus fish. But to whence and how? How shall we, do we have to versus? Or maybe goat versus fish. Maybe we just drop down on the verses there, and then by the power of goat versus fish, well, that can press the verses. Why don't we do a versus like this? Fences. This is not going to be easy, goat and fish. Let's just see what happened if we... Fences. Let's try this versus. Let's try this versus. Delicious fencery, you say? Doesn't look very delicious to goat versus fish. Oh, goat versus fish. Perhaps goat versus fish can try this versus. Goat versus fish. So then, goat versus fish, we could fall to the bottom of the verses. Well, it's of course going to have to be the verses. Of course that's going to have to be the verses. Goat versus fish. Oh my goat versus no! Oh my verses. So we just keep riding the verse? If we could just keep riding the verse, that would be a celebration. Goat versus fish. Oh my verses. That's, well then we would have to, that could, if we just timing the celebration. Just timing the celebration. Perfect verses. Goat versus fish. Timing the verses and goat versus fish. Perfect verses and goat versus fish. Oh, goat versus fish. Difficult verses indeed. Fences. Ah, that is what happened on Goat vs. Fish. That versus provides a continuation. This is all we truly need on Goat vs. Fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Fences. Fences. Well, that's not going to help Goat versus Fish. Not an easy versus. We remember this being quite difficult the last versus. Devil Luna, welcome to Goat versus Fish. Devil Luna, are you goat or are you fish? We are a goat and we are trying to escape with the help of our fishy friend. Trying to escape this fence land. Goat versus fish. That's what we would like to do on Goat vs. Fish, but it looks like it's unversable. Electrified fences. Devil Luna, Goaty, celebration for Goat. Celebration for Goat. Your verses are written now on Goat. Your verses are written now for Goat. Celebration for Goat. Goat, 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 goat versus fish. Devil Luna, welcome to Goat versus Fish on Kick. Welcome to Goat versus Fish on Kick. Thunder Tracks, salutation. Salutation for your musication. Goat Boy with the celebration for Goat. They're really cheering for Goat. They're really cheering for Goat. They're really cheering for Goat. Goat versus Fish. Oh, my verses. What the fence? What the fence? Celebration for Goat. See Kenzo Goat. Not an easy versus. So once that versus has begun, then we send out the verses of Goat versus Fish. That is when, but it gets all fancy there. Oh, Goat versus Fish, why must you be so fancy? Celebration for Fish work in 1984. Counter versus for Fish, counter versus for Fish. What if Goat versus Fish, what if we just wait the entire verses? What if we just wait the entire verses? And then we send out the fish. That gets fence. That gets fence. Goat, 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 or a fish, goat, or... You're surprised John is not here. We love you here. So does Goat versus Fish. We do love to be here. We love especially when you're here with Goat versus Fish. Perhaps John will roll in. We shall see. Goat versus Fish. We're in this for the long verses. Goat versus Fish. Goat! We're in this for the long verses. Goat versus Fish. Goat. Fences. Frustration for a Goat versus Fish. Frustration for a Goat versus Fish. Do we need to start with that versus? Perhaps by the power of... Well, then it just, then... So when can we reverse that versus? When, oh when can we reverse the verses? Celebration for subscription. C. Kenzo subscribes to Goat vs. Fish. What the fence? That's a new alert for Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish doesn't remember having that alert on Goat vs. Fish. C. Kenzo 14-month celebration. Celebration C. Kenzo for Goat vs. Fish. C. Kenzo for fish, C. Kenzo for fish, and C. Kenzo with 14 months of Goat vs. Fish. That counts for 2 fishscription points. 2 fishscription points for fish. 2 fishscription points for fish. And we had another celebration. Goat Boy subscribed to Goat vs. Fish. So let's get a subscription point for Goat. Oh, that's the verses. We keep counting the bits of the Goat description, but we don't need to count the bits of the Goat description. We just need to count subscription as its own verses. So now we have 2 subscription points for fish and 1 for Goat and 1 for Goat. Celebration. Celebration. Celebration for Goat. Celebration for Goat. Celebration for fish. Subscription for Goat vs. Fish. Subscription for Goat vs. Fish. C. Kenzo with a mighty fish versus. C. Kenzo with a mighty fish versus. Are you seeking unification? C. Kenzo. One versus will have achieved unification. Okay, Goat vs. Fish. What has happened here? What has happened here on Goat vs. Fish? Goat, fish, Goat. We can do this versus, so we can leap on the verses and then we can send that about. That will save some pensory for Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish. Now, when do we send out the verses? Do we send it here? That's false. That's false verses. Let's focus on the timing of the sending out of the fish. What if we send out the fish at that verses? We said what if we send out the fish at that verses? What if we send out the fish at that versus? Goat versus fish, come on, fish. You versus what we say, you versus. You listen to Goat. Celebration. Celebration. Oh, my versus. Oh, Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Celebration for Goat versus fish. The timing of the fish, the timing of the fish. We have achieved Goatfish. We have achieved Goatfish once again by the power of C. Kenzo subscription, by the power of Freaky. By the power of Freaky TV, by the power of Devil Luna. Oh yes, Goat vs. Fish has all those verses. Freaky TV has all those verses. When you face challenges ahead, remember to verses together. The only thing more powerful than a magic goat is a magic goat with a fish friend. Celebration for Goat and unification. Celebration! 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 We have achieved the verses. Goat and let's do some maintenance on Goat versus Fish. Let's do some maintenance on Goat versus Fish. So that was a round of a scapegoat. That was a round of a scapegoat. And now we're going to escape from Goat. Goat boy Goat. Nice versus Goat. Freaky Devi. Let's do some verses with Goat versus Fish. An excellent verses and appreciation for Wow Mom for a contribution that Goat game for Goat versus Fish. For that Goat game for Goat versus Fish. For that Goat game for Goat versus Fish. So Freaky TV, Freaky TV. Love a scapegoat. First verses, let's check Streamlabs on Goat vs. Fish. Some verses they'll escape. And let's go to the dashboard of Goat vs. Fish. And let's go to the alert box of Goat vs. Fish. We have that verses. We have that verses. Variation subscription. That's the verses, that's the verses. Test the verses, Goat vs. Fish. Test the verses. We do not deny this, although we wonder why there's an echo on Goat vs. Fish. Now let's try to go to this verses. Let's test the verses again. Celebration, celebration. Maybe there was just something fencing going on. Maybe there was just some fencery going on with that one particular subscription of Goat vs. Fish. Freaky TV, does Goat vs. Fish? Freaky TV, are you in the verses? Calling Freaky TV to Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish accuses you not of fencery, Kenza. We accuse Streamlabs of fencery. Of fencing your epic verses to Goat vs. Fish. Your epic verses for Fish. Your epic verses to Goat vs. Fish. Freaky TV is here with Goat vs. Fish. So does Goat vs. Fish have a fence bot in the kick verses already? We thought that perhaps we do. But your recommendation of fence bot for kick. Goat vs. Fish, we do not take offense, Jayhawker. So what is your recommendation to Goat vs. Fish? We're doing some maintenance on Goat vs. Fish. Let's try to kick it with Goat vs. Fish. What is the verses? And while we are doing this verses, we will provide all the Goat and Fish with another marbleization for you to roll about, because we know you love to do it so. Another marble race for Goat vs. Fish. Exclamation play to join Goat vs. Fish. Can you clarify? We're asking you to clarify to Goat vs. Fish. Some verses, Goat vs. Fish is on kick, and then something happens on Goat vs. Fish and Freaky TV, you say, oh, sad space, oh, there's no bot, oh, where's the bot, oh no, oh, you don't have preparation, oh no. So we are asking you to clarify for Goat vs. Fish. What is this recommendation you make to Goat vs. Fish? Exclamation play to join Goat vs. Fish. You do have a bot. What bot has Goat vs. Fish? Bot Rix. Goat vs. Fish. So we have that versus. So why don't we do a little programification? Exclamation play to join Goat vs. Fish. You have 5 minuets to join the verses. Goat boy, nice to see you here in Goat vs. Fish. Exclamation play to join Goat vs. Fish. So here we have Botrix on Goat vs. Fish. Log in with Discord, log in with YouTube, log in with Twitch, log in with Trovo. How the fence do we want to log into this versus? That's a nice versus. So we can programification our own verses here in Goat vs. Fish. We want to programification a verses for tip. Yeah. Commands and stuff, yeah. Goat versus fish. Freaky TV can do this versus. Okay, well, we want a versus that when you say exclamation tip or. Oh, wow. Well, we already have a versus like that. Okay, what about Dono? Is Dono a versus? So we're going to change that versus. We're going to change that versus. And we just wanted to say this. That is the message, Freaky TV, we want in Goat vs. Fish. Maddie Mutation, celebration. If you say tip or dono, we wanted to say what Goat vs. Fish has just posted in chat. Can you do this for Goat vs. Fish? Can you do this for Goat vs. Fish? Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Hi. Maddie Mutation says tip, exclamation tip to Goat versus fish. Exclamation play to join Goat versus fish. We're just doing a few more verses here. This daytime verses may be coming to an end. Goat versus fish has a conversation to make. A conversation to make. Wow Mom, Goat vs. Fish, TML Rules, C Kenzo, Goat Boy, Robbie Hamo 99. Fish. Thundertrack sad for Goat vs. Fish. We still have a few verses left. There's still some verses remaining on Goat vs. Fish. Do not despair. Do not despair. So you say you can programification, Freaky TV? We want a programification on Goat versus Fish. We want the programification that when you exclamation tip, it gets that versus, and when you exclamation dono, it gets that same versus. Versus Goat versus Fish, Goat versus Fish, Goat versus Fish. Versus. Driest of lands. 1 minuet and 34 seconds left to join the marbleization race of Goat versus Fish. Working on it. Celebration, appreciation for Freaky TV. Play that Thundertracks versus. It's a lovely versus. Robbie Hamo, Hobby Ramo says fish. Hobby Ramo says fish this versus. Maddie Mutations, are you Goat or are you Fish? Ah, so we see interesting verses, Freaky TV, interesting verses. Bayoden 420, are you Goat or are you Fish? Maddie Mutations is fish, celebrating more fish. Fish. Bayoden 420, who is Prue. Interesting verses. What happened to all of your verses, Prue Lawrence? Can you not log in? Have you forgotten your fence word? Prue Lawrence says fish. 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 Ah, well, you should look into that verses. Working 1984, celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. We have 2 more fish. Prue the fish. Prue the Bayoden fish. Hobby Ramo fish. Goat Boy Goat. Maddie Mutations fish. You want us to play that Thundertracks track? Well, we don't know which Thundertracks track to which you refer, but we will play some Thundertracks if you mean this versus. Is this the verses you wish to hear? Goat Boy says goat, no fish. Freaky TV appreciation.
This is the current verses.
Goat versus fish. It's goat versus fish. It's goat versus fish. It's goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. So now, Freaky TV appreciation. We want to do a versus like this. We want to do a versus like this. When you type exclamation music, When you type exclamation music, we want that to appear on Goat vs. Fish. Goat Boy wants double the goat. Hobby Ramo. Appreciation, Freakish TV with another celebration. And Goat vs. Fish, we want this versus music. Goat vs. Fish. Spotify. When you say exclamation Spotify, we want this versus to appear. Freaky TV doing excellent verses. Matthew Big D has nothing for Goat vs. Fish, has nothing for Goat vs. Fish. Goat Boy is in the lead. Go, Goat, go, Goat. But see Kenzo the Fish is hot behind. It's the verses that we've been seeing in the chat. See Kenzo the Fish advances beyond Goat Boy. See Kenzo the Fish advances beyond Goat Boy. See Kenzo Fish. That's a marble win for 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 Fish. Fish marbleization, win for Fish. We've got one for Goat and we've got one for Fish. We've got one for Goat and we've got one for Fish. Appreciation, Freaky TV, appreciation. Appreciation. We have that versus. That's a nice versus. That's a nice versus of Goat versus Fish. Appreciation for Freaky TV for the appreciation and the celebration and the programification. And the programification. Ah, fences again. Don't. Why do you insist on resizing this verses of Goat versus Fish? We don't want you to resize the verses. Are you Goat or are you Fish? Are you Goat? Are you Fish? So with one marble win for Goat and one for Fish, let's roll one more marbleization race. Ooh, it's a versus of love. Is this a versus of love? Oh, wow. Exclamation play to join Goat versus Fish. Matthew Big D Fish. Matthew Big D Fish. Matthew Big D Fish. Matthew Big D Fish. Exclamation play to join the verses and then Goat versus Fish. We've got one win for Goat and one win for Fish. We have to determine this versus. Goat versus Fish. Verses in the chat. Verses in the chat if you have on this stream, on any stream of Goat versus Fish, requested do you be Goat or Fish to Dr. Demento. If you have made the Dr. Demento request, give us a verses in the chat. If you have not made the Dr. Demento request, give us a fence in the chat, and we will show you how to make the request for a Goat versus Fish. We need to keep requesting the verses. Wow, Mom did the verses. Path Test says, I already told you it's Fish. Time to end the channel. Celebration for Fish! Celebration for Fish! Path Test wants to end the verses. Path Test said, I already told you it's Fish. Time to end Goat versus Fish. You hear that, Goat? You hear how the Fish of Path Test disrespects you, Goat, and says that the verses can just be ended right now because it's already Fish? What a powerful verses by Fish. What a powerful verses by Fish. Celebration for Fish. Celebration for Fish. Well, the verses is not ended. The verses is not ended. The verses continues, Path Test. The verses continues on Goat versus Fish. And if you are versable enough to get in that verses, then you will exclamation play, to get into this chat of Goat versus Fish. Because guess what? You may think the verses are all over. You may think the verses have ended. You may think the verses have ended. You may say, oh, it's all about the fish. It's all about the fish. There's no verses for Goat. But guess what? Goat continues the verses. Goat continues the verses. Goat continues the verses. You can't stop the Goat from versing the fish. You can't stop the Goat from versing the fish. You can't stop the goat from versing the fish. So, goat, fish, goat versus fish. Watch you? Well, if we didn't versus better path test, we would say that you're watching goat versus fish. Celebration for goat versus fish. And we've got C Kenzo, we've got goat versus fish, we've got Thunder Tracks, we've got Matty Mutations. We've got Matty Mutations, so who here? C Kenzo. You love this tune, do you? North Dog raids goat versus fish with 18. Celebration. North Dog raids goat versus fish. Exclamation play to join goat versus fish. North Dog. Welcome to goat versus fish. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. It's a North Dog raid of the Goat vs. Fish. And I'll sing a song of Fish Center Live. North Dog has requested a song of Fish Center Live. North Dog, we will sing a song of Fish Center Live for you if you do a little verses for Goat vs. Fish. North Dog, if you do a little verses for Goat vs. Fish, we will sing the song of Fish Center Live. Appreciation for the radiation, appreciation for the radiation. A song of Fish Center Live and Automata Dog, are you goat or are you fish? We have a marbleization coming up here on Goat vs. Fish. Thunder Tracks. Goat and the fish do be fish. North Dog, are you goat or are you fish? What is the verses? We will show you now. We will show you now. Wolf's on Twitch, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. We welcome all the North Dog Raiders on Goat vs. Fish. I, this guy. So let's say you're listening to this verses and you're saying, wow. It's the new hit single of Goat vs. Fish. You say, wow, it's the new hit single of Goat vs. Fish. And you say, you know what, Goat vs. Fish? That song would be absolutely a celebration. That song would be quite a celebration if it appeared on the Dr. Demento show. If only that musication appeared on the Dr. Demento show, wouldn't that be an epic versus? The Dr. Demento, discoverer of Weird Alfred Yankovic, be they goat or be they fish. So how do we get Goat vs. Fish on the Dr. Demento show? We will show you how. You go to the request page that Goat vs. Fish is showing to you now. The link is in the chat. This can go for you too, Devil Luna.
Now repeat.
You go to this verses, and you put your name here. You put your name in the verses. You put your email in the verses. Celebration, Devil Luna has already done the verses. You say your email in the verses, and then request, you say, I formally request the new hit single, Do You Be Goat or Fish, by the artist currently known as Goat vs. Fish. You type this in the request. You type this in the request, and then you scroll down to the bottom of the verses and you send it. You send it. You send it. You just say, click send. That's the verses. Do this for Goat vs. Fish, and we will sing you a song of Fish Center Live. We will sing you a song of Fish Center Live. Matthew Big D, leaping for love, leaping for love. With that huge D. Huge D. With a huge D on Goat vs. Fish.
Because the goats do be goat and the fish do be fish.
Welcome again, North Dog Raiders, to Goat vs. Fish. If you do not already follow Goat vs. Fish, follow Goat vs. Fish and choose Goat or Fish. C. Kenzo says, request sent, celebration. Best song ever. It is truly the best song ever in the universe. But Matty Mutations now. Maddie Mutations. Wolf's on Twitch, welcome back to Goat vs. Fish. Wolf's on Twitch, are you goat or are you fish? North Dog, are you goat or are you fish? A shout out for North Dog for the mighty radiation.
The fish, do we fish? Do you be goat or a fish?
So fast. Maddie Mutations has gone past all other goat and fish. And for the triumph, Maddie Mutations, fish triumph. Fish triumph. Marbleization, fish triumph. Marble, fish triumph. North Dog claims to be both goat and fish. It's a fence raid. It's a fence raid, goat and fish. It's a radiation of the fence. Fence radiation of 18. Oh no. Fence radiation of 18. And Mad Mutations has triumphed. See Kenzo celebration. See Kenzo celebration. Maddie Mutation, Maddie Mutation. Maddie Mutation. Goat and Fish, Goat vs. Fish will now prepare the song of Fish Center Live. Goat vs. Fish will now prepare the song of Fish Center Live, and as we do, you can exclamation play for another verses of Goat vs. Fish. We prepare now the song of Fish Center Live. Exclamation play to join Goat vs. Fish. We prepare now the song of Fish Center Live.
Are you goat or fish? Are you goat or are you fish? This is the verses. Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish?
Preparation.
This is the verses. Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you
Preparation. 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 Fish Center Live. Recall the verses of Fish Center Live. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Dredge One, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Dredge One, are you goat or are you fish? Goat versus fish. Versus has begun. Goat versus fish. Tyrus with 200 bits. Tyrus with 200 bits. Tyrus with 200 bits. Welcome to Goat versus Fish.
Do you be goat?
Welcome to Goat versus Fish.
Do you be fish?
Just a little bit of tuner fish.
Because the goats do be goat and the fish do be fish. Do you be goat or a fish? Don't sit on the fence. Well, goat are of the land and fish are of the sea. But goat versus fish, which one do you be? Do you be goat or a fish? Meh. Do you be goat or a fish? Because the goats do be goat and the fish do be fish. Do you be goat or a fish? Don't sit on the fence. Now repeat after goat versus fish.
This is a mighty versus Tyrus at 200 bits. Inebriation celebration, inebriation celebration. Tyrus, are you cursing for the goat or for the fish? Do be goat, do be goat, do be goat, or do be fish, do be fish, do be goat, or a fish. Extension. Fish. Celebration, that's a blub for a fish. So what does happen here on Goat versus Fish? This verse is Goat versus Fish. It should be versing. It should be versing. So what's happening on Goat versus Fish? This versus goes to that versus. Goat versus Fish. Matty Mutation wins the versus again. And celebration for Fish. Tyrus the Fish with 225 bits. 225 bits for Fish. 225 bits for Fish. 779 for Fish. 779 for Fish. Celebration. 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 So here we have Goat versus Fish. Let's see. We have Goat versus Fish. We have Goat versus Fish going into Goat versus Fish. Ah, of course. We haven't plugged Goat versus Fish into Goat versus Fish. That would be cause of some fencery. Goat versus Fish. Wolves on Twitch, welcome to Goat versus Fish. That's another marble win for Fish. That's another marble win for Fish. We've got a lot of verses going on. Another marble win for Fish. A double Matty Mutations. Wolves on Twitch wants to play again with Goat versus Fish. Who are we to deny them? Who are we to deny them? Who are we to deny them? Another versus of Goat versus Fish. Exclamation play to join Goat versus Fish. Exclamation play to join Goat versus Fish. Let's get some fish behind Goat versus Fish. Let's get some fish behind Goat versus Fish. Ooh. That sounds like a fine versus. Blue win 11. Are you goat or are you fish? Time to sing a song of celebration. This is a song of Fish Center Live. And this one goes out to North Dog, who rates goat versus fish. Let's pick a different verses. That's a fun verses. It's a very fun verses. Oh, Fish Center Live, you're bringing me down. We sat and we watched as Fish Center left town. We didn't do nothing, did we even try? We watched the live stream. Went by. Now everyone knows just how much. Oh, I'm talking about Mark, Top, Zender, and Flump, Grilled Hamburger, Slider, and Tabitha Pillows. Oh, Fish Center Live, we wish you were around. We wish. Time Warner ran adults and streams right into the ground. We didn't do nothing, did we even try? Did we even try? We sat and we watched as Fish Center went. Yes, I'm joking. Now it's just how much we needed those hosts. I'm talking about Maxie relaxing Matt's hair. Tina and O, and also Dave Bonowitz. Fish Center Live. Where was goat versus fish? Where was goat versus fish? Where was goat versus fish when you were looking for your next hit guest? But now goat versus fish, we still stream and our verses survive. You can find us at Early Town Fest and on NBC. GT Live. Well, actually, it was pre-recorded. Goat versus fish. Goat versus North Dog 88. Freaky TV. A Blue Twin 11. Brando Creative. Kenzo. Tyrus. And Devil Luna. Goat versus fish. Goat versus... That song of Goat versus Fish, and of course, Matty Mutations. Celebration. That was a musication. That was a Goat versus Fish. North Dog. North Dog says goat? North Dog, are you declaring goat in the verses of Goat versus Fish? Amazing as always, amazing as always. Celebration. Celebration, Thunder Tracks Goat. Grand Brando Creative, are you goat or are you fish? North Dog denying the goat. Denying goat. Jayhawker 94. Yes, I'm John. Are you goat or are you fish? You Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish did see Yes, I'm John with the living stream. They're on there with Shrimpy Mo. They were doing a collaboration. It was a fine versus. So North Dog, did you request Goat versus Fish? Did you request Goat versus Fish to the Dr. Demento show? Have you requested Goat versus Fish? Goat versus Fish wins the versus. Goat versus Fish wins the marbleization race. Goat versus Fish wins the marbleization race. Goat versus Fish wins the marbleization celebration. Celebration for the marbleization. Celebration for Goat versus Fish winning the marbleization of Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish. We have to get that versus. Goat versus fishes, goat versus fish. And it is what it is. Goat versus fish, fish. Fish is a goat and a fish. And the goat and fish versus. Goat for you. We promise the verses we tell you are true. What's goat versus fish? You haven't a clue. But it is something to do. Celebration for goat, celebration for goat. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Goat are always versus the fish. Fish are always goats. And it was written and it was wrote that goat versus fish and fish versus goat. If that doesn't make any sense, rules, just don't sit on the fence. Celebration for goat versus fish. Celebration for goat versus fish. But the goat to be goat and the fish to be fish. Do you be goat or a fish? Celebration for goat versus fish. Celebration for goat versus fish. That was a little musication. That was a little musication. That was a little musication. Goat versus fish did win. Goat versus fish did win the poll, goat and fish. The poll of goat versus fish, the role of goat versus fish. We've got polls and we've got rolls on goat versus fish. We've got polls, we've got rolls. Celebration days to weeks. Wow. Interesting verses. Just the kind of verses we expect on Kick. That may be just how you perceive versus fish, but remember, goat versus fish comes from within you. Goat versus fish comes from within you. It's a versus that's true. John Ray Fish, John Ray Fish. John Ray Fish, John Ray Fish, John Ray Fish, 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 Hobby Ramo Goat, John Ray Fish. Celebration, celebration for goat versus fish. TML rules, welcome to goat versus fish. Brando Creative. North is calling goat versus fish the goat. It's calling goat versus fish the goat. And we've got goat, and we've got goat, and we've got fish. Well, goat and fish, we think it's time. We think it's time to count the goat and fish. We think it's time to count the goat and fish. We think it's time to count the goat and fish. We think it's time to count the goat and fish, but not before. But not before. But not before. Goat versus fish. Get in this verses. Not before we once again, for the sake of all goat and fish, for the sake of all goat and fish, spin. The wheel of verses. Wheel of verses. Goat and fish remaining on the wheel of verses, remaining on the wheel of verses. We've got goat in the French Alps. We've got puffer fish circles. And we've got twisty goat milk run. Wheel of verses. Goats in the French Alps. Chèvre contre poisson. Celebration for goats in the French Alps. Let's get French on goat versus fish. Oui, oui. Chèvre contre poisson. Jubbernugs, welcome to Goat versus Fish. Jubbernugs, are you goat? Or are you fish? Goat finally won something. Goat wins all kinds of verses, Hobby Ramo. You're just a depressed goat. You're just a depressed goat that just looks at the fish side of everything. But that's okay. You're still welcome to Goat versus Fish. I'm so confused. I guess goat. You guess goat? That does sound like you're confused. Because you're just guessing at goat? Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Gamer Girl Y2K says you are goat, but do you believe Gamer Girl Y2K today? Celebration Jubbernugs has chosen goat. Goat, 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 goat. Let's hear it for goat. Goat in the chat. We've got a new goat. We've got a new goat. The Space Coyote says fishing for goats. Space Coyote, are you goat or fish? Gamer Girl Y2K is going goat. We've got goat and fish all over the universe. Celebration. Goat versus fish. Let's see what we can find out on goat versus fish. Chèvre contre poisson, chèvre contre poisson. Chèvre contre poisson. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Behold! It's goat in the French Alps. A picture of wild goat. Wild, intrepid goat. In the mountains of Chèvre contre Poisson. Oh, we see farm goat. Oh, we see farm goat, but now we see wild French goat. Wild French goat. Jubbernugs has chosen goat. Jubbernugs, your goat is written in the verses. Hazemaker 420, are you goat or are you fish? Gamer Girl Y2K gets goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Jubbernugs, we need goats like you to join Goat versus Fish. Follow Goat versus Fish. Follow Goat versus Fish and continue in this epic versus. So there's goat. There's intrepid goat looking from afar. Looking from afar, intrepid goat. But let's get a little closer. Let's get a little closer. Let's get a little closer. Let's get a little closer on goat. Look at these majestic goat. Look at these majestic goat. Look at the goat. Wild French goat. That's a goat out there in the universe. You think of cute farming goats? No. These are goat on the land. These are goat on the land. Just like the very land of goat. The very land of goat. Goat recognize goat. Goat recognize goat. On the craggy mountain land of goat. On the craggy mountain land of goat. Look at the French goat. Look at the chèvre. Look at the chèvre. Look at the chèvre. Look at the chèvre. Goat. 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 Chèvre contrefaçon. Goat! Goat! French goat! French wild goat! Smell those verses. Ah, beautiful verses of goat versus fish. 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 Celebration to Jubbernugs, who follows goat versus fish. Who follows goat versus fish? 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 I'm sold. Sold on goat versus fish. Sold on goat versus fish. Invest in goat versus fish. It's one of the best investments you can make. Goat versus fish is one of the best investments you can make in the entire universe. Jubbernugs, if you are sold on goat versus fish, well then have I got a versus for you. I've got goat futures that you can buy off 3 basis points. I can get you 3 basis points off of goat futures, and all I ask you to do is to fund the fish fund to the tune of 10% of whatever it is that you're investing in goat, and then short the fence. I'm not gonna lie, I've been on the fence before, but we're gonna short the fence. Anyone going long on fence this versus, listen, fence is going down, fence is going down. Goat versus fish is going up. Goat versus fish is going up straight to the verses. Invest in goat versus fish and follow goat versus fish on all social media. We need to create some real invigoration. We need to create some real spirit. We need to get some real movement behind goat versus fish to keep goat versus fish versing up and up, ever higher, ever higher. Can we trust you? Can we trust you to remain sold on goat versus fish? You're sold on goat versus fish. Buy goat versus fish. Buy goat versus fish. Appreciation stonks. Thank you for that versus. Thank you for the versus stonks. Appreciation. Appreciation. Jubbernugs. Goat versus fish posts a link to the Instagram of goat versus fish. And while we're versing, everyone, please follow goat versus fish on TikTok. Freaky TV, please make a versus for TikTok that looks like this. Exclamation TikTok does that on goat versus fish. Oh, we already have that versus. Never mind, Freaky TV. We already have that versus. Goat versus fish is better preparation. Burned fish redeemed, celebrates more fish. We already have the versus. Freaky TV, we already have the versus. Celebration more fish. Celebration more fish. Burned fish, 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 fish. Celebration. What's this versus? Goat versus fish. Lock that versus to place. Let's continue looking at these French goat. Oh, look at that goat. Look at that goat. You don't want to fence around with that goat, do you, fish? Look at that wild French goat, and look at those horns, pointy horns. Pointy horn of goat. Pointy horn of goat. Look at fish. Fish is feeling fear. Fish is feeling fear. Launch failure, redeem celebration for goat. Launch failure, are you goat or are you fish? Launch failure, are you goat or fish? Celebration. Celebration. Chèvre. Now these are the chèvres of my home country. From the low country, yes. I may be a troll fencer, but any fencer knows that we take pride in our own. Yes, because we are better than all of you combined. Yes. Chèvre! Chèvre! I saw Goat vs. Fish on AGT. Burn Fish saw Goat vs. Fish on America's Goat vs. Fish Talent on Talent. We saw Goat vs. Fish. A beautiful versus. A beautiful versus, yes. A beautiful versus. A beautiful versus indeed. French, goat. Appreciation to all the viewers of Goat vs. Fish, all 26 viewers of Goat vs. Fish. And here we just see the mighty land of goat. We could look at this versus and we could lament that we don't see any more goat, but why don't we just take a versus to appreciation the land of goat. Isn't it a beautiful goat? Isn't it a beautiful land of goat? We think so. Should have won celebration for fish, celebration for fish. Majestic goat land. Majestic land of goat, beautiful goat land. Beautiful goat land. Smell that fresh verses. Smell that fresh verses. Goat and fish, that was French Alps goat from the Wheel of Verses. That was French Alps goat from the Wheel of Verses. Jobber Nugs, horn you right in the verses. Well, Goat and Fish, we think it's timing for calculation. It's timing to calculation. Remember, Goat and Fish, if you are feeling generous to Goat versus Fish, you can exclamation tip in the chat. You can exclamation tip in the chat to fund a giant chalkboard of Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish wants to get a 4x6 wheeled chalkboard of Goat versus Fish so that we are doing the living stream. We can be saying, oh, we have a goat in the verses, and goat. Fish, we have a fish, oh, we have a fish, and 200 bits for goat and a fish, and look at this verses, and look at this verses. And then we can flip the verses. And it says, are you goat or fish? And we flip the verses again, and we're counting bits, and we're doing education of Goat versus Fish. We can say, oh, 1 goat plus 1 fish equals Goat versus Fish. Let's talk about the history of goat. Don't you want that on Goat versus Fish? Exclamation tip to make a contribution to Goat versus Fish for a large chalkboard of Goat versus Fish. But now the timing has come. Now the timing has come. Now the timing has come. Your tracker says 3x4, not 4x6. Well, Goat versus Fish, that's why we need this versus, because Goat versus Fish does not know how to count unless we can do it on the Goat versus Fish. 3x4. 3x4 is the verses. 3x4 is the verses. Goat versus Fish. Schooling fish. We have to school the fish, and we need education for goat. New Delicious, welcome to Goat versus Fish. New Delicious, welcome to Goat versus Fish. The Space Coyote is saying mountain fish, ocean goat. It's getting fancy. Midnight Rooster, are you goat or are you fish? It's timing. It's timing. It's timing for us to count the verses. It's timing for us to count the verses. It's timing for us to count the verses. So let's count the verses on Goat versus Fish. 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 Goat, my friend. Midnight Rooster comes in with the late goat. So let's count the goat. Let's count the fish. Fish. 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, 11s, 12s, 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s, 17 fish. 17 fish. Celebration for fish. Goat. 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, 11s, 12s, 13s, 14s, 15s, 16 goat! 16 goat and 17 fish? Let's count that versus again. 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, 11s, 12s, 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s, 17 fish. 17 fish. And goat. 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, 11s, 12s, 13s, 14s, 15s, 16 goat! Come on, goat. And we counted the midnight rooster for goat. Now we have a few fence sitters. Noodalicious on kick. Are you goat or are you fish? And Space Coyote, you could declare goat or fish. Workin' 94 says you don't school the fish schools you. It looks like that's a win for fish. It looks like a win for fish. One more fish than goat. And in the verses of bits, 779 bits for fish. 779 bits for fish. We did get a lot of bits. We got 200 from Tyrus. 375 from Workin'. We got a lot of bits for fish. And Goat Boy, we counted your goat for double goat. We counted Goat Boy for double goat in this verses. We counted Goat Boy for double goat in this verses. Celebration for Goat Jumper Nugs. But fish has more bits than goat, so that's fish. That's a fish kind of verses. That's another fish. Let's reverse the verses. In the verses of subscription, we have 1 for goat and 2 for fish. That's another versus for fish. Marble wins also go domination by fish with Matty Mutations with a double fish. Launch failure is a celebration for goat. Oh, launch failure with the celebration for goat. We don't think we got launch failure in the goat. We're going to call it an even versus. Even versus for goat and fish. Even versus for goat and fish. So we'll just add a goat to the verses. And Thundertracks resubscribed with Prime to Goat versus Fish. Thundertracks with a Prime resubscription to Goat versus Fish. So that makes a second subscription for Goat. Now we have even subscriptions on Goat and Fish. Now we have even subscriptions on Goat and Fish. Launch failure says fence sitter. Launch failure, are you on the fence? Ah, launch failure is calling goat in a fish world. Oh, goat can exist in a world of fish. Fish can exist in a world of goat. Even subscription. So now we have bits. We have bits going for fish. We have bits going for fish. We have bits going for fish. We have even verses on subscription. And Brad in Pain says, I don't have a carbon footprint. I just drive everywhere. Wow. You know, that's not very impressive to me. As a troll fencer, that is very crude and rudimentary, and I think it's quite not very intelligent. Celebration for launch failure with the gifted verses. Launch failure with the gifted verses, and we do not know what has happened to our special alerts on Goat versus Fish, but we're just going to let it versus. We'll restart Goat versus Fish, and maybe we'll get the verses back. Celebration. Launch failure with the gifted verses. Gifted verses for Goat. Launch failure with the gifted verses for Goat. Launch failure with the gifted verses for Goat. And that adds one more spin to the wheel of verses, which we will have to continue next verses. Launch failure, bringing it up for Goat, bringing it up for Goat. That means the verses goes to Goat. That means the verses goes to Goat. 3 Goat, and radiation 18 radiation points go to the fence. From the North Dog radiation. Appreciation, North Dog, for the radiation, but it's just wasted on the fence. It's just wasted on the fence. But now we have fish. 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 We have a fish versus. Now we have a fish versus launch failure. And Thundertracks bringing it up for Goat in the subscription versus retaliation by Goat. But fish domination the marble race. Fish domination the marble race. So that's 3 verses for fish and 2 for Goat. But Goats take the polls. But Goat take the polls, Goat and Fish. Goat take the polls, although we will insist that if we look at the YouTube poll, the poll on YouTube has gone fish with 57% vote for fish. If you want to get in on that YouTube, subscribe to Goat vs. Fish on YouTube. And get in that vote. Get in that vote for fish. Get in that vote for goat if you can, because fish did get one poll of fish. Did get one poll of YouTube fish. But 2 polls for goat, 2 polls for goat, so that's goat in the verses. That's goat in the verses. Goat and fish, that's 3 votes for goat and 3 votes for fish. Win for goat, Brad in pain, says win for goat. Oh, Brad in pain, you're still in the verses. Brad in pain, are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? I don't have a carbon footprint. I just drive everywhere. Well, that does not make any sense. If you drive everywhere, you have a massive carbon footprint. No, no, not at all. I just drive everywhere, so how can I have a footprint? Your carbon footprint does not literally refer to your feet, you imbecile. I take offense. Don't you realize that's the environment? Don't you realize that there are hurricanes destroying the world? Don't you realize that there are massive environmental devastation? And you want to make light of this? I'll make light of whatever I want because I don't care, and I am a totally I have an anti-human attitude towards everything. I'm a total misanthrope, and I don't care. I just want to see people argue about me about nothing, even though I don't hold any principles of my own. It makes it a lot easier to get under people's skin. Yes, I can see that now. Fence sitters, what are you going to do? If you want to generate discussion, try Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish is a great way to generate some conversation. Just enter the chat. Just enter the chat and say, are you goat or fish? That's a great way to start some conversation on Goat vs. Fish. So goat and fish, we have 3 goat and 3 fish. We have 3 goat and 3 fish in the verses. And that means goat and fish. That means goat and fish. That if we go to the list of triumphs, what we have achieved, the unity of goatfish. We have achieved the unity of goatfish once more. So we go to the list of triumphs. Do you dream of goat or fish? Do you dream of goat or fish? Unification once more. Unification once more. Launch failure offers bribery for goat. Who is goat? Launch failure is offering bribery. Attention. I want Goat vs. Fish in Aqua Teen. Yes, Goat vs. Fish. We should start a petition to get Goat vs. Fish on Aqua Teen and mail it to Adult Swim and demand that you have Goat vs. Fish on Aqua Teen. That would be a great versus. So those of you, you may think, oh, Goat vs. Fish. Oh, Goat vs. Fish. We guess that's the verses. We have ended the verses in a unification of goat and fish, in a unification of goat and fish. In a unification of goat and fish. You may say, wow, goat versus fish. We have ended the verses in the unity of goat and fish. In unification. A beautiful unification. You may say. You may say, goat and fish, that we have achieved a beautiful unification of goat and fish this verses. You may say that, goat and fish. But there's been a recent tradition on Goat vs. Fish. Hogrim with 35 months of Goat vs. Fish. Hogrim with 35 months of Goat vs. Fish. Because now that we have achieved unification, we wipe clean the verses. We wipe clean the verses. Now that we have achieved unification, we wipe clean the verses. We wipe clean the verses. And now, Goat and Fish, we enter what we like to call the post versus verses. Now we enter the post versus verses. We have an ultra quick, ultra fine, ultra fast verses to determine who triumphs in the post versus verses. Goat and Fish, we have now entered the post versus verses, and the verses begins anew. Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? We begin with a marbleization race of Goat versus Fish. And Hogrim, are you goat or are you fish? Exclamation play to join Goat versus Fish. Exclamation play to join Goat versus Fish. We have a marbleization race. We have a marbleization race, and you'd better get in that verses. You'd better get in that verses, because there will be only one marbleization race this verses. Hogrim, are you goat or are you fish? Dragon Balls 325 goes fish. Dragon Balls 325 goes fish. Thunder Tracks, we need declarations of Goat and Fish in the verses. We've got goat, we've got goat, we've got Hogrim the goat, we've got Hogrim the goat with 35 months of Goat versus Fish, and that counts for Goat versus Fish. That counts for 4 subscription points for Goat. 4 Goat subscription points for Goat. Thunder Tracks goes Goat. Thunder Tracks goes Goat. Goat Boy goes Goat. Goat Boy goes Goat with double the verses. With double the verses for Goat, because Goat is Goat. Jubbernugs goes Goat. Jubbernugs goes Goat. Are you goat or are you fish? Hogrim with a resubscription to Goat versus Fish. Freaky TV, are you goat or fish? Dragon Ball 325 celebration for fish. Devil Luna, are you goat or fish? Get in that verses. Get in that verses. And Goat versus Fish will start a poll on Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish will start a poll on Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish. We're in the post versus verses. It's a quick versus to see who wins the verses in the post versus verses. Fence. Fence. Don't sit on the fence. Don't sit on the fence. Unification once more, Goat and Fish. A 3-minute poll. A 3-minute poll has begun on Goat versus Fish. A 3-minute poll has begun on Goat versus Fish. And launch failure with the gifted verses. Failure to launch with the gifted verses. Launch failure with the gifted verses. That's another verses for Goat. That's another verses for Goat. Celebration for Goat. Another Goat scription. Another Goat scription. Another Goat scription. Dragon Balls the Fish. Dragon Balls the Fish. Another Goat scription. Celebration, 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 celebration. And Goat and Fish, we have a poll. We have a final poll. We have a final poll this verses. We have a final poll this verses, Goat and Fish. We have a final poll this verses. It's for all the verses. It's for all the verses of Goat versus Fish. It's for all the verses of Goat versus Fish. Let's look at that verses. Let's look at the poll on Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish. The poll on Goat versus Fish. Man is the poll. View the verses. View Goat versus Fish. There's the poll on Goat versus Fish. You have to vote in this verses, Goat and Fish. You have to vote in this verses, because this is the post versus verses. This is the post versus verses. And in the post versus verses, we verses on Goat versus Fish. And there it is, Goat and Fish. There's the poll on Goat versus Fish. There's the post versus poll on Goat versus Fish as we listen to the Pandemonium Big Band here on Goat versus Fish. The post versus poll on Goat versus Fish. We've got Goat with 36 and Fish with 25. Vote, 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 vote now, Goat and Fish. Vote now, Goat and Fish. Appreciation for launch failure and Hogrim with gifted verses. Launch failure appreciation, launch failure appreciation. Launch failure appreciation and Goat versus Fish. We wonder can we just refresh the alerts on Goat versus Fish? Why are they being all fancy on Goat versus Fish? Goat versus Fish, properties of Goat versus Fish. Refresh the current verses. Celebration. I want Goat, dang it. Hogrim says Goat may have, and here we are. Now we've got Work in 1984. We got Thunder Tracks, Hogrim, Goat versus Fish, and Launch Failure, and Goat versus Fish, and Jubbernugs. We've got a lot of Goat in the race. The Fish seem to have abandoned the verses. They might be giving the post versus verses to Goat. They might be giving the post versus verses to Goat. And here comes TML Rules, but TML Rules is Fish. TML Rules is Fish. If TML Rules can win this versus, but there goes Launch Failure, there goes Launch Failure, and there goes Thunder Tracks. There goes launch failure. And there goes Thunder Tracks. Celebration. And the poll continues, 95 for Goat. Fish with 74, 96 for Goat, 74 for Fish, 75 for Fish, 75 for Fish, 99 for Goat, 99 for Goat, 101 for Goat, 77 for Fish. It looks like it's going to be Goat taking the poll. Goat take the poll with 102. Celebration for Goat, celebration for Goat. Goat take the poll with 102 votes for Goat, with 102 votes for Goat. That's a poll for Goat. That's a poll for Goat. Goat, Goat, Goat poll, celebration. Let's find out what happened with the marbleization. There have been no bits given to Goat or Fish. Even a single bit could sway the verses. A single bit could sway the verses. Goat and Fish. In the post versus verses. In the post versus verses. And here comes Jubbernugs. Launch failure. Launch failure. As long as they don't get eaten. Thunder Tracks was ejection, as was Goat Boy. Launch failure. Will you launch? Will you have a failure to launch, or will we achieve triumph? Launch failure. Launch failure! Has launched! Celebration! Launch failure! Launched in the verses! It's Jubbernugs! Jubbernugs takes the verses! Jubbernugs takes the verses, and launch failure with 1 bit for Goat, with 1 measly bit for Goat. 1 bit for Goat. Launch failure has failed to launch. Celebration! Jubbernugs! Jubbernugs, the new Goat wins the marbleization race for Goat, and we have 1 bit from Goat from launch failure. Are you Goat or are you Fish? The poll has ended. And Goat, we want to see the results of the verses. Goat won the poll. Goat won the poll with 1 vote in the kick chat. Jubbernugs, nice verses. Nice verses. We've got subscriptions for Goat. 13. Thunder Tracks with 13. With 13 votes for Goat. With 13 votes for Goat. That's 14. 14 total bits for Goat. 14 total bits for Goat. 14 total bits for Goat. Subscription radiation, Goat and Fish. It's time to count the final verses. It's time to count the final verses. It's time to count the final.
Goat versus Fish. Hey, thank you for the raid. I guess before you ask if I'm Goat or Fish tonight, I'm going to say, well, I guess I was Goat tonight. So someone redeemed me to become a Goat. So yeah, I guess I'm Goat tonight. If you want to. If you want to ponder the great question of if you're a Goat or Fish, I guess you should check out Goat vs. Fish. Check it out. Yeah, just stop by there, and you'll just come to that conclusion. You can also be a fence sitter, but you don't want to do that all the time. Actually, you probably don't really want to do that at all. It's either you're Goat or a Fish. That is the way of Goat or Fish. I was Goat today, so I will say yeah, Goat.
Celebration! Celebration! That was our most recent show on Goat vs. Fish. That's our most recent show on Goat vs. Fish. That is our most recent show on Goat vs. Fish. Televersus. Goat vs. Fish. Ham Mods has arrived to support Fish. Wow. Ham Mods has arrived to support Fish. Ham Mods has arrived to support Fish.
No.
Classic verses. I'm kind of mad because I thought, I don't know why. First time I went on Goat vs. Fish, I chose Fish, and I'm thinking you could have changed. Am I right? Goat vs. Fish. Can we do people change sometimes? But Goat is strong. Goat is basic. Goat is the.
Oh. No way.
You know, Goat is the go-to for the noobs, the real ones. You know, the real ones choose Fish for the challenge. You know, and we overcome. Fish for the fucking win, bruh. Team Fish. Ah, wow, merci, tu m'as amené, hein. Wow. Beaucoup merci, tu veux savoir tes goals?
Celebration for the fuse, Goat and Fish. That was the fuse and Milk City TMLZ rules, redeemed celebration for fish, redeemed celebration for fish, redeemed celebration for fish, redeemed celebration for fish. And we have Hexy the virus the fish, and we have Hammods the fish, all coming in for fish. So that's 2 more fish, that's 2 more fish. That's 2 more fish. That's 2 more fish, and we have an even number of goat and fish. So with those bonus fish, we have even numbers of goat and fish. We have 5 goat and 5 fish, but we have 14 bits for goat, no bits for fish. That's a versus for goat, unless fish want to throw some bits in the verses. Goat have taken the bits. Goat have taken the bits from fish. And subscriptions definitely going goat. Marbles going goat. Polls going goat. Goat. Goat have won the post versus versus. Goat have won the post versus versus. Goat have triumphed in the post versus versus. Goat have triumphed in the post versus versus. So now we go into the list of triumphs. And on this versus of goat versus fish, it was a unification with goat in the post versus versus. With goat in the post versus versus. With goat in the post versus versus. As we have been listening to the Pandemonium Big Band. Appreciation, goat and fish. Appreciation for joining goat versus fish for another exciting versus of goat versus fish. But the versus has come. The versus has come for radiation, goat and fish. Goat versus fish, yes. We have been streaming a lot more in recent verses. We want to give you more goat versus fish. Polluted celebration for goat. The post versus verses, yes. Yes, goat, but goat versus fish. We just have verses to attend to. We have verses to attend to now. Celebration for your support of Goat vs. Fish. Consider joining the Patreon of Goat vs. Fish. Join the Goat vs. Fish sticker club to receive stickers like this. Ooh. Follow Goat vs. Fish on all social media at Goat vs. Fish. On TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Book of Faces. Freaky TV appreciation, Freaky TV appreciation. So now let's get ready to radiation to the next verses.
Do you be goat? Do you be goat?
Let's get ready to radiation to the next verse.
Do you be fish? Do you be goat? Because the goats do be goat and the fish do be fish. Do you be goat or a fish? Don't sit on the fence. Well, goat are of the land and fish are of the sea. But goat versus fish, which one do you be? Do you be goat or a fish? Do you be goat or a fish?
And they claim there are 31 viewers on Kick.
And the fish do be fish. Do you be goat or a fish?
They claim that there are 32 viewers on Kick. Which seems a bit strange to Goat vs. Fish because there aren't that many chatters on Goat vs. Fish. And Goat vs. Fish has received no new followers on Goat vs. Fish. So who the fence is viewing Goat vs. Fish on Kick? That's what Goat vs. Fish wants to know. Have you been lurking on Goat vs. Fish? Have you been lurking on Goat vs. Fish? Is there viewer inflation happening on Goat vs. Fish?
Now repeat after Goat versus Fish.
We'll see you out there, Goat and Fish. We'll see you out there, Goat and Fish. But we suppose we shall conduct a host. Fence sitters indeed. Do you have a recommendation? Who shall we host, Freaky TV? Who shall we host? Have you a recommendation? No one, there is not many who we are following who are live at this versus. Yes. Robot goats? Oh yes, we had a versus of robot goats and robot fish just earlier in the verses.
Don't sit on the fence. Goat versus fish came up to me and said, a goat or a fish, which one do you be? Do you be goat or a fish? Do you be goat or a fish?
And who shall we radiation? Who shall we radiation here on Twitch? That's a whole other verse. Who shall we radiation? Who shall we radiation?
Do you be goat or a fish? Don't sit on the fence.
Let's radiation. Let's radiation Roop once more because Roop stopped into Goat versus Fish just a versus ago. Let's radiation Roop just one more versus.
Because the goats do be goat and
let's
the
radiation
fish
Roop
do
just
be
one more
fish.
versus. Doobie doobie doobie. There's Vibe Stance. Vibe Stance is in the verses. Risky Biscuit Band. Redolent Thought is in the verses. Putting on radiation suit. Oh, but the goat.
But the goat, doobie goat, and the fish. Doobie goat or a fish.
But the goat, doobie goat, and the fish, doobie fish. Doobie goat or a fish.
Yo, saggy nankins, you hitting the galaxy?
Celebration. Nephew Uncle Joseph. Nephew Uncle Joseph is live on the verses. Well, Skittish and Bus. We're going to raid Skittish and Bus because we had a nice conversation with them at TwitchCon. So we're going to radiation them now on Goat vs. Fish. We shall radiation them after we do the freakish radiation to Rancor Spittle. We will host them on Kick. We have hosted on Kick.
GoatVsFish versus. Celebration.
Let's fucking do the damn thing.
Let's do the thing.
Chatters, welcome in.
We shall see you on Kick. We shall see you later on Kick. Celebration.
Welcome in, my friends. Hugs for drugs.
And the
Good to
YouTubes.
see
We'll
you
see